Wrestling Roundtable Radio, back on the air here on blogtalkradio.com, simulcast on GoFi Live. The number to call is 347-857-4647 to share your thoughts, opinions, and questions with the panel. And it's not a very big panel tonight, is it? Because the only one on the line as of this moment right now, along with myself, is Will Evan Brooks, who is in our chat room every Monday night during Raw on WrestlingRoundtable.com. Hey, Will.
What's going on, Eric?
Not a lot, and not a lot of good either. It's just you and me right now, and I feel like we're the only people actually listening to the fucking show, too. But before we dive into some of the latest goings-on in pro wrestling and mixed martial arts, wanted to mention a couple things. Firstly, I did mention WrestlingRoundtable.com. We have a couple updates for you over there. First of all, we also have new polls, but we'll get to the polls later on. But we also have some reviews, or recaps, whatever you prefer, from Anthony Amon, looking back on some old shows, SummerSlam 1998. We also have a SummerSlam 97 recap, but SummerSlam 98 is new, from Madison Square Garden in 1998. But he also looks back on a March 26th edition of WCW Monday Nitro. The significance of this 1996 Nitro, it's the first wrestling show he ever saw. So, sentimental value there, of course. I think we all remember our first show as fans. Do you remember the first show you ever saw, Will?
Live or on TV, man?
On TV.
You know what? I started watching back in the days of Superstars, man. So, I can't remember my first show I ever watched. I just was always ingrained in watching wrestling because my grandfather was really into it. And I just I know I've always watched wrestling, except for years from like when the invasion ended and it kind of left a sour taste in my mouth to about like say 3 or 4. I don't know. Like one time I got back like around my last year in college, about 08, 09. That's when I got back into it. So about it's a good 5-6 year spot where I wasn't watching it. But for the most part, my whole life I've always been watching wrestling. Monday nights were always booked for me, man.
Yeah, and I mean, I started watching the Superstars or the weekends. It was Superstars of Wrestling on Saturday, WWF, and then Wrestling Challenge on Sunday around the same time also for us here in the Northeast.
Wrestling Challenge, I remember that. Oh, my God, that was old. That was the Tonight Show thing they did, right?
Oh, no, this was essentially the same format as Superstars. I think you're probably thinking of TNT.
They had that one, that made it look like it was a Tonight Show kind of thing.
Yeah, it was Tuesday Night Titans, I believe.
That was just like pre-Monday Night Raw. It would just be him and Bobby Heenan. There wouldn't be any wrestling, I don't think. It'd be like rerun wrestling, but it'd be like promos galore, and it was always good.
Well, there was also primetime wrestling on Monday nights, the precursor to Monday Night Raw, which I watched as well. But the first big show I remember was actually coming up. The anniversary is this WrestleMania 28. It's on April 1st. April 1st, 1990. That was my first WrestleMania, my first pay-per-view, and of course that was Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. Now we've got Rock and Cena, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Some of you are on the line already, so I'll get to you in a moment. But before I do, wanted to mention a very special fan of ours, Will, because I often lose sight because it's easy to concentrate on the negative, and there's so many great fans of ours who leave comments every time on YouTube and Facebook, even Twitter and iTunes and the message board. Not a lot of them anymore. Somehow we lost a shitload of people last year. I don't know how that happened, but we still have some fans at least, and they always leave great comments, great show, enjoyed the show, always looking forward to the next show, and those are great people. Thank you very much. But then you've also got people who just say dickish things, and it sucks because I spend so much time on this show and so much energy on this show. Money too, people. Fucking Blog Talk Radio is $40 a month for this account. So we've been doing this show a couple years. You can do the math. It's not cheap. But of all the fans that we have, there's one in particular I wanted to mention at least right at the top of the show, and I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. I'm probably not, but it's Steve Oftelli or Oftelli out in California. Now, this is a guy, when we were running Pro Wrestling Respect shows, Will, he would buy tickets through our site. And I remember when I got the order, I was like, is he really going to go? I'm supposed to mail these tickets to California. We're running in Burlington, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Well, in the special instructions, he wrote, "I'm not going to make it to the show. I'm in California. I just wanted to support the show." And he did this.
Cool.
I know, and he did this multiple times. I thought that was so cool. This is the type of fan that's probably watched every show, and we have every show we've ever done, by the way. That's all the radio shows and all the video shows combined. So that's over 100 shows now. Those are all on iTunes and Blog Talk Radio. So a lot of the shows that are from the first season that aren't available on YouTube anymore, every show we've ever done is at least there in podcast or audio form. So I'm sure he's listened to all of them. He's bought the T-shirt. He's done it all. And he was the first fan to make a donation. He actually sent us some money through PayPal, and I just thought that was amazing. I wanted to mention it again, Steve Oftelli or Oftelli. Thank you out in California for your support. It means a lot. I wish there were 10,000 more fans like you, but I at least wanted to acknowledge you at the top of the hour. Now, we do
if we
have
10,000 more fans like him, we'd be on ESPN by now.
Well, maybe one day. We will see. Ryan in Massachusetts. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, guys. What's up?
You've been a long-time fan, and I'm glad that you called in first because, as you may have seen, I've been mentioning it on Facebook and other places because it was an idea I had this weekend, but I thought, because I knew going in it was going to be a pretty light crew, so to speak, that I thought, well, we've got some regulars who call in all the time. What if we had a special radio panelist? Because obviously we've had radio panelists in the past, Coriander Aiken in Chicago, Amira Rahim in Baltimore. So I thought, let's see if one of the fans wanted to be one. Is that you, Ryan, in Massachusetts?
I would like to think so.
Awesome, great. So let's consider you part of the panel tonight. And now that we're opening up the line, so to speak, we have a few other people on. So let's see what's on your mind. First up, a new number for us. It's a 424 area code. Your name and location, please.
It's Woo from Los Angeles. Woo S. Kim. What's up, guys?
Hey, what's up?
Woo!
Yes. Hey, I can't believe I'm on the show. I'm going to truly work out now.
It's nice of you to interact with us beyond Facebook, which is the usual, isn't it?
Yes. I usually like to keep myself anonymous, but, step out of the shadows. I don't need to
anonymous. What are you, the general manager of Raw?
I'm the little kid that says, it's going to be the end of the world as we know it.
Wait, time out, everybody. I'm watching Conan right now, and Hornswoggle's on TV.
Do we really have to mention this?
I'm sorry, I just saw that. It made me laugh. Excuse me. Go ahead. Keep talking, Will.
No. We're talking apparently about little people who I know Eric really, really loves in professional wrestling.
In the past few years, I've ripped on Hornswoggle because I really just don't care for the act. It's nothing against him as a performer or person or anything. I just don't like the sort of shit that he does. That being said, I love Mexican minis. I've been watching some clips from, I don't know if it's Galavision or whatever that AAA has, and I just saw one of Marco Corleone, who American audiences would remember as Mark Jindrak, tossing around what looked like Mascarita Sagrada Jr., and even those guys against each other doing the lucha stuff I thought was really awesome whenever they would have Mexican minis. But anyway, I want to get to some other calls, Woo. Sorry, Ryan from Massachusetts beat you out on being the radio panelist for this week, but now that you're on, what's on your mind? You have anything you want to say? Any questions? What do you want to do?
A lot of people, some people are talking about on the Facebook group Jericho's comments about Punk's family, and I really was perplexed about this when I first saw it because people, like wrestlers, have been making fun of people's families' work or quote-unquote, I'm using my quote fingers, shoot for a long time. I mean, people forget Lawler in 93 making fun of the Hearts. I mean, what's the big deal?
I don't really get why this is a big deal all of a sudden, kind of like you were saying, especially because, first of all, do we even know that's true? I know Punk has done the promos in the past, like in Ring of Honor, the famous Wrestle Rave promo with Raven, my father was a drunk, and that's why I hate you. You remind me of my father. Well, how do you know that wasn't even just something he made up for the storyline then? And even if it was, how do you know his dad's not okay with it? I mean, like you were saying with Jerry Lawler in '93 or so with the Hart family, well, Stu Hart really was old, and he was making jokes about Stu Hart and Helen being old and near death back then. And you know what? It was hilarious. I don't know why everyone's so touchy about this all of a sudden. He mentioned his father. Big deal. Like, what do you think about that, Will?
They're given so little airtime to sell a World Wrestling Federation title match at WrestleMania that, you know what? They have to reach for shit like that because they get no airtime to sell the match. I'm all for it if it makes the match interesting. I mean, I want to see the match because it's going to be a badass match. But they have to do something drastic like that just to get airtime to make people talk about the match because all the airtime is going to either Teddy Long versus John Laurinaitis or fucking Rock Cena. I mean, it's fine and all, but the world title match is getting really overshadowed, and I'm not particularly fond of that, especially when it's going to be an amazing match like it's going to be.
Well, don't you think it just adds a little more oomph, makes it a little more personal, other than just the simplistic, not that simple is bad, but the simplistic, I'm better than you and I want to take the title back?
I mean, I have no problem with what they're doing right now. I mean, everybody complain like, oh, they're going too far. No, because it could all be completely full of shit for all we know. We don't know Punk's dad. We don't know his Punk's sister. And like, I'm sorry, back in the day when you wanted to call a guy out, you made fun of his mother. So making fun of the guy's dad and sister, no, I mean, it's not too far. Not far enough.
Don't you think it's a sign of regression, Ryan, in the sense that, oh, this is too far? Excuse me? This is the same audience that calls for the Attitude Era to come back. Do you know the type of shit that they would do in the Attitude Era? And this is going too far. Hell, they made up that whole fucking Big Show's dad's dead or just died when he was really dead in reality years before that. And he's a bastard and all that other shit they did with that feud alone. So do you think people are just really overreacting to this, Ryan?
Absolutely. I mean, the same group that calls for the days of Ty and Ty castrating people. I mean, if you, like you said, the Big Show's funeral thing, that actually, I think, made it into the top 10. The Oh My God CD collection. This, honestly, I think it's good television. I mean, say he is an alcoholic. This is something that's not new to Punk fans who have been following his career for a while. If he's not an alcoholic, let's just say this is just good television. Same as, like, say, an alcoholic that are on CSI or something. It's TV people.
Hey, Eric, it's Orlando.
Oh, hey, Orlando.
Hey, how's it going? Oh, man, yeah, I was just going to bring up the Big Show and Big Boss Man angle, talking about death and all that.
215, that's a Philadelphia number, I believe, or Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Philadelphia.
215, you're on.
This is Chuck from Lansdale.
Hey, Chuck, what's up?
Yeah, I have nothing wrong with the Punk Jericho storyline at all. I mean, I think even like alcoholism, the series it is, it's really not like so outlandish of a storyline, and I'd rather
certainly not for WWE.
Yeah, I'd rather watch that than the last 3-4 weeks of HBK, who's not even an active performer. Him and Triple H, and then every now and then The Undertaker just doing these 20-minute circle jerks for 30 minutes of a show, and they're like really doing nothing for that storyline at all. I mean, the Hell in a Cell match might be good, but the build-up's been horrible. I'd rather see Punk and Jericho getting that time.
Don't you think, judging from these segments that you've been talking about with Undertaker, Triple H, Michaels, etc., on one hand, people are happy that they're not doing too many pay-per-views at the time, because we're going through all of March without one now. But doesn't it also feel like WWE's like, we've got probably 2 or 3 weeks worth of material that we could stretch out for this stuff, and we've already stretched it out.
Yeah.
So we're really like just on a treadmill here. What do we do for the next couple of weeks before WrestleMania? Just have Rock and Cena do some more talking and singing shit, and same for Undertaker, Triple H. Don't you get that sort of feeling from like these main segments?
Yeah, and I actually am one of the few people that have enjoyed the Rock Cena stuff. A lot of people all of a sudden have just like a lot of smart marks are turning on The Rock, although I think it's funny because it's like you're booing him now for the stuff that he was doing 10 years ago that you loved. And the whole point of him being back is that nostalgic feel, is that you should still love it. All of a sudden, if you don't like it, it makes no sense at all. Now, as for the whole Triple H and HBK and Undertaker thing, it's almost just like, it's just boring. I don't care about, I'm better than you. Oh, yeah, well, Sean's better than you. And then basically they're just like looking at each other for the rest of the show. I have a tumor growing because of that shit.
The reason why people loved The Rock, Dad loved it when The Rock did it 10 years ago, is because we knew he was going to wrestle later on. Like, he's going to wrestle later that night in Raw. And now we're not going to see him wrestle for another couple of weeks. It's just talking and talking and talking. Now, I'm with you. I mean, I've been enjoying it because, I knew that going in. That's what it's going to be about. But I can see where people are complaining a little bit in the fact that he's only going to wrestle one match. But as far as you were talking about The Undertaker, Triple H, and HBK, I'm totally with you. The promos are so fucking boring. I don't care. And I'm sorry, when did the question become who's better, Triple H or HBK? To me, that's not even the question. Shawn Michaels owns Triple H. Triple H is even on the same map as HBK in terms of in-ring ability. Now, granted, there was a time when Triple H was probably one of the better guys going in the entire world, but he still, even his best, was not nearly as good as Shawn Michaels on No K Day. But I got to give it up to Orlando for making a very good point about the CM Punk stuff. He brought up Boss Man and Big Show. The Boss Man would ridicule Big Show about his dad dying and actually took his dad's casket and drove off with it in a truck. And I'm sorry, I think, yes, and that was, I remember back as a kid thinking, holy crap, that's, how could this guy be so evil? And now, yeah, so this CM Punk, Chris Jericho thing isn't even compare to that. And also, that a feud also made Big Show look fucking awesome because it really made him break out of the shell he was in at the time.
I thought it was hilarious.
Exactly, I did too. But as a kid, I was like 13 years old here, man. So to me, it's like, what an asshole! Oh my god! But I'm with you, man. Like, yeah, this is it's what happens when right before WrestleMania. All it is become promos upon promos upon promos. I could have went to Raw last night if I really wanted to. It was in Philadelphia. But I wasn't going to go there. I knew I'd be lucky to see 3 matches if I went to Raw last night. So, of course, I didn't go. Although I am kind of pissed off I didn't go and see Shane Douglas doing a little ECW invasion in Raw last night. But other than that, I'm kind of glad I didn't go because apparently I didn't miss much.
Joining us right now is Rodney LeConte. Hey, yo, Rod.
Hey, yo, everyone.
What's going on, Rod?
Just getting home from training, long day, and it's just been busy and enjoying this weather that I so dearly missed.
I missed the winter myself because we didn't have one, but that's a whole other issue. I mentioned fans at the beginning of the show, and a lot of fans still don't like the fact that we talk about MMA at all, Rod. And you'd think since it's been, since the first season in 2008 that we've talked about MMA, they would have gotten the point by now. But before we talk about some of the latest MMA shows, I wanted to get your opinion on something because we just did show number 58. That's online in whole. It's bookended by MMA talk because we talked about the year in review for pro wrestling and MMA, and also for pro wrestling and MMA, Brock Lesnar's careers, which we'll be touching upon later. But yet, every time we do one of these shows, every time we do a radio show, there's always these fans who are like, why are you talking about MMA? It's 2 different things. Give us the time when wrestling starts so we could skip ahead. All this other shit. Now, there is a positive feedback I wanted to give, but first of all, this is our show. We could talk about whatever the fuck we want. If we want to talk about Charlie Chaplin movies, I don't care if it's called Wrestling Roundtable. I'll call it whatever the fuck I want. But that being said, what I don't get, Rod, and I'll get your opinion on this and everyone else's, but what I don't get is, yes, they are 2 different things, but the comparison is obvious. I've made the case a million times. But what I don't get is, how is it that all these other pro wrestling coverage sources, whether it's GoWork.net, Fighting Spirit Magazine, fucking Wrestling Observer, that's the thing we get all the time, it's Wrestling Roundtable, not MMA Roundtable, yet fucking Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer, people pay for that, and they still talk about MMA. I'm sure they complain about it there too. But why is it that all these other sources or sites or shows or whatever can cover MMA, but maybe it's because the word wrestling's in our title, because there's no wrestling in MMA, I guess. There's no wrestlers in MMA. But what do you think about the criticism of some fans that we shouldn't do MMA?
It's something that's always going to be there. I think it's just really the wrestling purists, like a lot of the MMA purists, really hate the comparison with pro wrestling, and they're the ones that really discredit Brock Lesnar, even though he had a great amateur wrestling career. And there's always going to be people to the far left and people to the far right. There's not going to be too many people like us who are crossovers.
There's a few.
Exactly. Yeah, there are a few, and it's good to get people who watch wrestling and then get them started in MMA. I think that really helps the popularity of the sport. But I just think that they found a internet-based show that was like, wow, maybe something that could be strictly wrestling. But even though that we've been talking to MMA for about 4 years now, they still don't get it. Or maybe the first few shows they started watching were all wrestling. MMA is a grown sport and not something that should be ignored. It's our job to help it progress and spread the word and get it to where it should be.
Well, I'll tell you what I really pride myself on as far as this show and its content is whatever we talk about, we do justice to it. We do a good job, and we maybe cover it from angles that people didn't consider before, so it might open some eyes. And you see all the time, whether it's old wrestling or old MMA or whatever we're talking about, you see a lot of people leaving comments like, wow, I didn't know that, or I really enjoyed the show. In fact, on Twitter, it seems like we've got more MMA-related followers than pro wrestling followers. We've got lots of MMA fans on Twitter. So, Will Brooks, what are your thoughts on the coverage of both genres?
Screw them, okay? Listen, we've been watching wrestling and mixed martial arts for years now. We obviously know what the hell we're talking about. We're very well versed in both sports. Why the hell not? Why the hell shouldn't we talk about both? I mean, plus mixed martial arts, there aren't many shows out there that talk about it like we do in the detail and actually give insight. Watch all the shit like we do. So yes, we should be talking about both sports, and we enjoy talking about both sports, and we have fans who enjoy us talking about both sports. If you don't want to hear it, tough shit. Fast forward. See you later.
I don't think we're going to get a lot of dissenting opinions here, but let's keep it going around the table. Ryan from Massachusetts?
I mean, as I just said, despite what the fans want to say, despite what Vince McMahon wants to say, despite what even Dana White has to say, wrestling and MMA are connected. They have a lot of similarities. They have a lot of interlocking elements. And, I mean, I know from a lot of the panelist standpoints, they loved it when Lesnar made the jump because they're like, sweet, this is just the segue we've been waiting for.
Actually, that's pretty much the exact conversation we had. Isn't that right, Rod? Like when we were starting up the show, because obviously not all of us, there's some of us who were still very into it, but a lot of us were disenfranchised with the way a lot of things were going in pro wrestling. So when Brock jumped, we were like kind of testing the waters a bit. Like, let's cover Brock's thing and see how it goes, and then we pretty much branched off from there, didn't we?
Yeah, pretty much. That's how a lot of the newer fans got into MMA. Brock Lesnar brought a lot of fans, which is good. Wrestling fans are loyal. It's a very good fan base to have because stick with the product through the ups and downs, and hopefully a lot of those fans stuck around to see the growth of the heavyweight division and the UFC since the era of Brock.
Yeah, I mean, not everybody was watching old VHS tapes of old SEG UFCs like we were, Rod, but yeah, MMA fans are loyal too. I mean, MMA fans are what kept UFC and MMA, the sport, alive in the dark days when they were banned from pay-per-view. Guys like Tap Out and really people who train and participate in the sport itself, those are the real diehards. I mean, granted, those are like the energy drink-drinking, affliction-wearing douchebags today who hate the fake shit, but at the same time, they did keep their sport alive. But you were saying, Ryan?
I think people who are pretty much shitting on the whole I don't like MMA probably never watched it. I mean, if you sit them down and put Forrest Griffin versus Stephen Bonner or Dan Henderson versus Shogun Rua or Chuck Liddell and Vanderlei Silva.
Pettis Henderson.
Absolutely, Pettis Henderson or Henderson Guida, Edgar Maynard. If I could list all the names of all the fights that people would find extremely entertaining, we'd be going on till Friday. So the point is, the fights are out there. People, they're entertaining. They're fun to watch. They get you pumped. They get you excited, and and believe it or not, they do tell great stories, even better than the people who actually are trained to tell stories in the ring. You're pro wrestlers. Give it a chance. Don't just push it aside because, I like pro wrestling. Get over it.
Well, yeah, and not every fight is that exciting either. Granted, they get a bad impression. Oh, it's just guys laying on top of each other for 15 minutes, but it's not scripted, so you can't control everything. Like in pro wrestling, at least you're supposed to be able to control everything. But at the same time, Orlando, it seems like there's a lot of MMA backlash right now, specifically from internet fans, which I find very fascinating and very telling from a psychological point of view, because I talked about this on the Facebook page, but the gist of it essentially was that years ago, you take the typical smart mark, the observer reading, 5-star classic, everyone giving star rating bullshit, work rate concentrating goofs, and they would pay lip service to things like if someone incorporated an armbar or jiu-jitsu or strong style is realistic because they hit hard. They paid lip service to all this stuff, and I think it was easy for them to, because they throw the word shooter around so much, but yet they don't even know what it really means. They say they respect all this realistic-looking stuff, yet they know nothing really about what the real wrestling actually is. And I think that's why there's a lot of backlash now. You see, like, this jiu-jitsu jack-off stuff with Davey Richards and Kevin Steen in the 10th anniversary show, which we'll get into detail about that. But the incident I'm talking about is Kevin Steen called Davey Richards a jiu-jitsu jack-off. And, of course, all the reports on the Internet about this spelt jiu-jitsu wrong, and really just shows their ignorance of what real fighting is.
If you look at a lot of wrestlers today, they're actually delving more into the mixed martial arts. Like, I saw a video of CM Punk training jiu-jitsu, and Davey Richards in his camp trained jiu-jitsu. American Dragon trains in different forms of MMA. And a lot of wrestlers are starting to utilize this stuff, even though still pro wrestling is scripted and fake. But these are legit stuff that they could utilize in the ring to make wrestling that ultimate hybrid of everything together and still make it fun and entertaining to the rest of us.
Well, this backlash that I'm talking about, specifically about hating on that sort of stuff and guys like Davey Richards doing that sort of stuff, I really think it betrays an insecurity in these wrestling fans, because they don't understand real fighting. They're not familiar with it. They don't know how it operates. They don't know how the sports go. They don't know what the rules are. And I think they get intimidated. So their opposite reaction is to brush it off. Well, if I wanted MMA, I'd watch MMA. If I wanted that, blah, 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 but I like my storylines and blah, blah, blah. And I don't relate to that. Sorry, I was the type of fan, I've explained on the show before, that forget even the history of pro wrestling itself and wanting to learn about that and its different events and different people and different styles around the world and all that stuff. I think I had a pretty healthy respect for legit combat, like the real origins of wrestling with pancration in ancient Greece, and even amateur wrestling, Greco-Roman. I mean, I'm not an expert at all, but I at least would pay more than lip service to it. I appreciate what the real athletes, so to speak, not that wrestlers aren't athletes, but what the real thing actually is. I am not going to dismiss it like that. So I see the common origin between the two, but I just think wrestling fans reacting like that, at least the smart mark ones, are just really showing an insecurity there.
It kind of reminds me of, like, Democrats and Republicans. They're going to stick to their guns on what they feel strong about, and they won't ever meet in the middle. But, I mean, thank God
that's why I'm an independent.
That like both of us.
The reason I brought it up is because we got a great message. You may remember we did that show, and it was a risk. We did an all-MMA show for our video show last year, and it was looking back at the SEG years of UFC. And just 6 days ago on YouTube, Mikey Knox1 left this awesome comment I wanted to read for you, Rod. He goes, Guys, I've officially graduated. I've dabbled some interest, but going back and actually listening to the radio shows has converted me. Imagine that, someone actually listened to our radio shows.
Nice.
And I just don't skip over the MMA parts now. Ha ha. The one where you talked about the GSP Shields fight actually really interested me since me and my girlfriend watched it, and she loves that Canuck. But that was my springboard, and now I'm addicted to pre-weight class era or SEG UFC. Thanks, guys.
Nice.
So, yeah, we can serve as a little springboard because you see so many, and even Caligula Ravishing was just saying in the chat room how I'm not really into MMA, but you guys talking about it, your passion for it has really opened my eyes. So thanks a lot, and that really means a lot as far as what this show means, not just bringing wrestling fans together and wrestlers together with wrestling fans, because I think that's been a very backwards relationship with all the marks and all that shit, but really just giving everyone a voice and bringing everyone to the table. So I think we can reach across the board between pro wrestling and MMA, and that's why Dan Severn was such a great interview, wasn't he?
He was amazing. Coolest guy ever, very nice. I could have asked him anything. I could have asked him if I could have a night with his wife, and he would have been like, nah, I've gotten mad at me. He was the coolest dude. I'm really glad I got to meet him. It was truly an honor to meet such a legend.
Yeah, so we've done some good things with the show. Now that we've touched on MMA, wanted to talk about some of the latest things going on in MMA because the big show recently really wasn't a UFC show. It was Strikeforce, airing on Showtime, and that's because it was headlined by women for the first time in a while, and it was the fight. Definitely the biggest women's fight since Carano Cyborg a few years ago, but this time, undefeated Ronda Rousey was challenging the women's bantamweight champion, Miesha Tate, what on the surface was the hottest MMA fight ever, two very attractive women going at it, but very legit athletes. Ronda Rousey, it was her longest fight ever, and it didn't make it out of the first round. Still undefeated, 5-0 now, with armbar submission victories every time. Somehow a bone did not break in that amazing armbar she got in on her second attempt. Tate got out of the first attempt somehow, and I don't know about anybody else, but it looked to me like Rousey had a look on her face like, what? Like she couldn't believe it, but just great back and forth action, and such guts on Tate's part to not tap out when it looked like her arm was being bent in half the wrong way. But eventually she did, could not escape. And Ronda Rousey, despite what a lot of people saying she didn't earn this title shot by defeating anybody in that division because it was her first fight at 135, she earned it. Now I guess she moves on to Sarah Kaufman, but Ronda Rousey, the bronze Olympic winner in judo, the first American to do so, now is holding a title. Wow, what a fight. I think I've said a lot about it. Let's hear what you got to say, Rod.
I think this is probably one of my favorite fights. I mean, I guess it's hard to say after UFC 144 because there are a lot of great fights. But, yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite fights to watch so far this year. Such a great card and such, I guess, a well-built-up card, not just because of two women, but because it was two women that had legit heat going into it. There's a lot of build-up, a lot of talk. The wins are even interesting. From when this is now, it's like there was a lot of heat between the two ladies. And the fact that Ronda Rousey really backed up what she said was amazing. And the fight was amazing. The first attempted armbar, the fact that Miesha Tate could get out, and then she got the harness and took Ronda Rousey's back, and Ronda Rousey got up and hit that beautiful judo throw, and then got double hooks in and was able to get an armbar off of that. It was a beautiful grappling at its finest. Like, this match was a treat to watch, and this was big for Strikeforce because there's not a lot of star-making fights. I mean, there are a lot of great fights, but star-making fights. This was a star-making fight.
Especially with all the promotion going into it.
Exactly. My buddy Jesse Holland over at MMA Mania said it best, that she might have been the first fighter to win the belt in the first fight in the division and clean out the division in the same match. I mean, it's really great, and I guess we're excited for Sarah Kaufman, which, by the way, I thought was a huge fuck-up that that match wasn't on the main card because, like, I'm
that's
sure
building your next match right in the main card. Yeah.
Not even that, but you're building women's MMA. I said the same thing about Gina Carano and Cyborg fight. If you can have two women in main event, why not have two women on the undercard too to help build up that division? It just made no sense to me. They could have taken out that Josh Thompson fight. But yeah, I thought it was a great performance. I'm really excited for Ronda Rousey's next fight. After that performance, she's like one of my top 3 favorite fighters. I would love to see her keep winning forever. It's almost like the Brock effect where an athlete did so well in another sport and she's translating that into mixed martial arts. What great was too, Eric, was the post-fight
camel toe
interview. That's it. But her post-fight interview was very real because as much as I like trash talk, I hate when after a fight the fighter's like, oh, well, this is just to build a fight and blah, 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 I got you, and yeah, she's a great guy, we're going to go train together, even though I told him that I wanted to kick his teeth at. She was absolute shit thing. He didn't feel bad when she did. She was a good fight, but she deserves what she got. If Ronda Rousey gets past Sarah Kaufman and Miesha Tate beat 1 or 2 opponents, I would not be opposed to see another rematch between these women. All in all, great fight, great for Strikeforce, but at the same time, it's almost disappointing because, Strikeforce is basically hanging on a few strings here, and it's like, what's next?
I was thoroughly impressed. My question is, after a night like that, do you think Dana White's going to reconsider his women are never fighting UFC comments?
That's a good question and an appropriate one because when I said the hype going into this was all over UFC. This was in their magazine. This was in their newsletter. This was in Dana White's Twitter. This was everywhere from UFC itself. I don't think it changes his idea or perception that there isn't a deep enough women's roster out there.
Right.
But I do think he sees dollar signs with Ronda Rousey, as you were saying.
Well, I mean, it's not like the sex or anything. He has, I would say, it's not where there's just 2 or good fighters, the rest are women who have no idea how to fight. I mean, but I'm saying, if the women's division, if the fighters in Strikeforce can build themselves up and keep putting on quality fights like this, I don't know, maybe he could change his mind. Maybe he'll find good enough women who can compete at that level. I'm not going to say it's anytime soon. I'm saying it might be a deal to the future.
We're having some trouble with your phone there, Ryan. I don't know if you want to maybe try hanging up and calling back in, but you're going in and out there. But we'll get back to you. But what you're saying about Dana White in women's MMA, here's what really drives me up the wall whenever he talks about the lack of women out there. Okay, even if that was true, and let's grant it in this scenario, okay, there aren't enough women out there, there's not enough women in Bellator or doing grappling tournaments or anything else, Cyborg suspended, let's just say there's not a lot of women out there, okay? Well, if the problem is we don't have enough talent, why don't they just do an Ultimate Fighter and cultivate it themselves? That's the whole idea of the Ultimate Fighter, is to bring more talent, fresh talent, scout talent, bring them into the fold. They could create a whole division by themselves with just one season of Ultimate Fighter, building up, let's say it's the fucking Rousey and Kaufman fight. Make them coaches on Ultimate Fighter. It's not like the women have a lot of fights every year anyway. Rousey and Kaufman, the next season of Ultimate Fighter after Faber Cruz in America. I think they could actually get something going with that, but that's a whole other thing. Will Brooks, your thoughts on the fight?
Well, I thought it was a great fight, and you know how we always like to joke, we always like to compare pro wrestling, mixed martial arts, like we just were doing a couple minutes ago.
Yes.
And we always joke, like, what would be a certain fighter's finish? Like, Owens Jones would be, like, his spinning back elbow probably his finish. I think Ronda Rousey really discovered her finish move is definitely the armbar. She probably does a better job.
She got her nickname from Roddy Piper anyway.
Then back to she does a better armbar than Alvaro Del Rio. But we just did an episode about Brock Lesnar, and you asked us, did he deserve the chance? And I remember saying no, but you know what? He won, so the argument should have been thrown out the window. I think it's the same thing here. Yes, maybe she didn't deserve it, but she won, and she won clean. It wasn't like it was like a controversial finish. I don't see the argument against her anymore. And you know what? If they want to do the Ultimate Fight, which would be a good idea, we've been talking about it for a while now, they should like wait until after Rousey beats Kaufman, then have the rematch, Tate versus Rousey. 2 hot chicks, Ultimate Fighter every week. Bam, you got guys watching, and hopefully they'll be smart enough to realize that women can fight and they're worth watching.
Or maybe when Cyborg gets her suspension lifted, because there's already been trash talking there. Rod, did you see the last UFC on FX?
I did.
Well, then you saw what went down with the flyweight tournament, kind of stalling before it began, practically.
Pretty much.
Well, what happened was the flyweight division was talked about for a long time, 125 pounds, and finally got it started. It was essentially going to be a 4-man tournament starting on the latest UFC on FX show, with the winners fighting on later in the year to crown the first champion. This would be their 8th weight division, I believe, but it's going to be a longer wait than what we thought, because the opener was Demetrius Johnson and Ian McCall. Demetrius Johnson was initially announced as the winner, wasn't he?
Yeah, that was horrible.
Johnson was initially announced as the winner, which I didn't see at all. I really had Ian McCall at 29-28 myself, but what happened was the commissioner in Australia couldn't do math either, just like me, and it really was supposed to be a draw, in which case it was supposed to go to a sudden death round, which I believe would have been 2 minutes, but by the time they caught that error, it was too late. Big fuck up. You know they're not happy about that. But let's see what you think before we get to the second flyweight fight, Rodney, on Demetrius Johnson and Ian McCall.
The first round was close. I guess it would have given a slight edge to Demetrius Johnson. And then the second round was all Ian McCall. I mean, he knew he had it. He probably could have finished it if he wanted to, but he was just really feeling the energy from the crowd and just pounding away on Demetrius Johnson. I think if they went to the third round, it would have been Ian McCall. But that decision, I remember thinking, like, this has to be a damn joke. It was the worst decision. I'm like, what match were they watching? I don't know. Like, something needs to happen where they need monitors or at least learn how to write or something, because that was just horrible, unbelievable, and I'm just glad to know that it was a mistake and not an actual decision.
Well, there was no disputing what happened in the second flyweight fight, because Joseph Benavidez knocked out Yasuhiro Urushitani in 11 seconds of the second round. It was a TKO. So that was pretty decisive. Your thoughts on that one?
Benavidez all day, and I'm predicting Benavidez is going to be your first UFC flyweight champion.
He certainly looked it after that fight.
Yeah, and he's going to hold it for a very long time.
Here's a lesson from the main event, which was between Martin Kampmann and Thiago Alves. The lesson is, when you have to set a DVR for a UFC event that's live, always set it later for what it says it's going to end at.
Yep.
Because I found that out the hard way. As I'm watching this on DVR, Rod, I'm going down the timeline when you're fast-forwarding through commercials and shit, and I'm seeing that the end is coming soon, and I'm like, wait a minute. This isn't supposed to be where it's going to end. I could tell I'm going to run out, and then I'm going to just watch this as long as I can. And I watched and watched and watched, and it ended right at the beginning of the third round.
Same with me.
Fucking DVR.
I'm like, what the fuck happened? I'm like, oh, so pissed.
Well, what happened in the main event was, going into the third round, it certainly looked like Thiago Alves was coasting to a win. Kampmann was, I think, down 2 rounds at that point. But this is why anything can happen in MMA. If you had just stopped right there, Rod, and went, well, I'll just assume because the DVR ran out that Alves won, we'd be fucking wrong.
Oh, I know. I was surprised to find that out, actually.
Because and I ended up watching it on my phone. But I found the third round ended with a submission by Kampmann with a guillotine. Alves was trying to secure, essentially, the third round for himself with a takedown, and boy, did he pay for it. Put his head down right into Campman's armpit and tapped him out. A few moments later, Campman from behind gets the tap-out win. So what do you think on the fight that we didn't see in the whole?
I thought both fighters actually looked good. I would like to see the Thiago Alves of 2008 when he was finishing Matt Hughes, dominating Josh Koscheck, finishing Carl Parisian. People thought that this might be the guy to beat George St. Pierre and had that big fight at UFC 100. Since that was, he hasn't really been that same monster. Because now that GSP's out, I think that he would be a good match for some of the top guys. But yeah, Martin Kampmann, he's definitely proven that he's still stable in the welterweight division. And let's see who they put him up against next.
Speaking of GSP, you know what I was watching before?
What's that?
UFC 58 with him and BJ Penn the first time.
Oh, wow.
I know. Watching this, and this is where he essentially earned a title shot against Matt Hughes for the welterweight title. I'm like, all right, the production's essentially the same. We got Rogan Goldberg, the same music, the same style, the same everything, more or less. Everyone looks just a little older now, and Bruce Buffer's gotten a lot more into his announcing. But I'm looking at this like GSP, they're talking about this guy could be the future of the welterweight division, and of course he was because he's been champion ever since, but it really just puts it into perspective for you because it feels like, this is what, 2007? That was so long ago it feels like, and especially for the fighting game, which is...
I think that's probably 2006, that fight.
Okay, well, whatever it was, like, GSP's been champion for years. I mean, the main event was middleweight champion Rich Franklin, who we all know who he lost the title to because Anderson Silva's been champion ever since, too. Like, that really just puts it in perspective for you, how long these guys have been champions in their respective divisions and what that really says about the caliber of athlete these two are. And, of course, GSP is going to be out most of the year, but, man, what an athlete this guy ended up being and was. But I just thought I'd mention that in passing. But anyway, Ultimate Fighter on FX finally making the jump over. The live first show, which featured, 16 fights or something ridiculous, 1 round each. And they crammed all of them in, and Dana White said it went off without a hitch. Lots of finishes. And we've seen 1 episode so far. A lot of people saying, oh, the ratings are bad because it switched channels and nights and blah, blah, blah. They still have about 1 million people watching or so. What are your impressions on the new season of Ultimate Fighter on FX so far?
I think it's good because it's something new. I like Faber and Cruz because we know that they do have a real dislike for each other. And the fighters are exciting. I thought this past week's fight was really good, and the fights even on the first episode, like you said, a lot of finishes. I think a lot of these guys could really do well in the lightweight division because lightweight division, it has some UFC staples, but a lot of the top guys came from the Ultimate Fighter. So I think it'd be really exciting to see some of these top guys or whoever wins the show to be thrown in the mix and make that division even deeper than it is.
I love UFC, hate reality TV. As much as I've tried watching in seasons past, I've never really gotten into Ultimate Fighter. But do you think that the fact that the fights are live every week adds a very different element to it?
It does, because as a fight fan, just to know that there are live UFC fights, you almost feel obligated to watch. It kind of sucks because I've heard that there's a tape delay on the West Coast, and the West Coast kind of gets screwed, and that's a huge demographic over there, probably more so than here on the East Coast. But, I think it's something fresh, something new. It's the first season. It's not like you get 5 million views. People still have to adjust to watch it on Friday nights, watch on a different channel, and they're seeing 2 guys that haven't been in the UFC for a long time. There's a lot of adjustments that need to be made on a casual fan standpoint, but I think this is something that could work.
We recently had 2 of, I would say, the most one-sided polls we've ever had on WrestlingRoundtable.com. We've got 2 new polls up right now. The 2 new polls are, if the Wrestling Roundtable was on TV, what channel should we be on? Kind of probing there, see what you guys think. And looking forward, what match will be the best match at WrestleMania 28? Some predictions there on your feelings going into the pay-per-view in a couple weeks. But the latest polls that we had, want to read those results, Rod. You're going to find it interesting, I think.
Mm-hmm.
First up, who will win the rematch for the UFC middleweight title later this year? And it's supposed to be in Brazil, by the way, between Anderson Silva and Charles Sonnen. I said this was one of the two most one-sided polls we ever had. Get this. Only 25% voted for Charles Sonnen.
I could see that.
75% voted for Anderson Silva. Do you think it's because this time, as opposed to, at least it's supposed to be, as opposed to last time where he went in and we found out after the fact he had broken ribs or hurt ribs or whatever the case might have been with his ribs, and Sonnen dominated him for 99% of that fight up until the end, which is, I think, a reason why I thought Sonnen would have done more votes than he did. But do you think the health factor is a reason why people think Anderson Silva is going to beat Charles Sonnen this time?
They just can't picture Anderson Silva losing, and because of Charles Sonnen's last fight and how close it was with Bisping. And Bisping is a real tough fighter. Anderson's camp has been wanting to fight him instead, saying, oh, Bisping would be a great match and this and that. Charles Sonnen squeaked by him. I just think it's because how dominant Anderson Silva has looked since his loss to Charles Sonnen with the wins over Vitor Belfort and making Yushin Okami look like a child.
Yeah, we saw what happened last time Anderson had an agenda against an opponent like Okami in Brazil.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, it's going to be in Brazil. It's not like they didn't know Charles Sonnen's game plan before, but it's different now that he actually knows that he's been in the ring with them for 23 and a half minutes, and he knows what he goes for, how he blocks certain moves, and his grappling techniques, and what he's capable of.
The other poll involved Undertaker at WrestleMania in his match. Now, when I was writing up this poll, you'd think there's one of two options, but then another one popped in my head just as I was writing it, so let's see how it plays out. After WrestleMania 28, this involves the streak, Undertaker will be 3% voted for 19-1. So 3% think maybe Shawn Michaels and Triple H are working together. I don't know. Or Triple H is just going to fucking win. I don't know. Now, 89%, that's the majority, voted for 20-0. That the streak will continue. That's the smart bet. But as I was writing, like I said, another option came up, and 8% voted for that, right in the middle. That Undertaker will be 19-0-1.
Oh, wow. That would be so cute.
No one ever thinks about that. What if it ends in some fucking, like, bullshit double clothesline spot and both shoulders are counted down?
I don't think they'd pull out a Hell in a Cell for one of these guys not to walk out of with their hand raised and have Shawn Michaels come out of retirement, do special refereeing, and that'd be a lot to have. You know, it's not like they're going to have a rematch the next month with the next minute.
8% voted for that, Rod. So.
But it was a very interesting choice.
Well, who knows? We'll see. Those are some of the latest polls we had. 2 new polls up right now, WrestlingRoundtable.com. And now let's go to some of your calls. First up, we've got Abe in Augusta, Georgia. Hey, Abe.
Hey, sir.
You don't have to call me sir, but I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. What's on your mind?
I don't know that you hear about it, just let I think it was the Wrestling Roundtable fan page on Facebook.
Yes.
Yokozuna is going to go in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about that? I know a lot of people are huge Yokozuna fans, myself included. What do you think?
Well, it's certainly deserved, and I think that eats up their one dead person quota for the year. So even though it's in Florida, tough shit, Macho Man. Not this year, but he had to go in sometime. Definitely deserved. Anything else, Abe?
Oh yeah, Mr. Fuji should induct him, in my opinion.
Well, The Rock's there. Bret Hart's denied that he's been asked. So, anything else?
The new youth movement. Do you think they did a good job there in 2011?
As I've intimated on the show before, ask me in a year. Because like I said, they always, and they being internet fans, love to compare that picture of Bryan and Punk with the belts to Eddie Guerrero and He Who We Do Not Speak Of. But like I alluded to, that was very short-lived, and that bone being thrown to the boys and the smart fans was really, you could see through it in a couple months, at least, like at Bad Blood 2004, when Triple H and Shawn Michaels are going 47 minutes in the main event in the Hell in a Cell, and Benoit, who was, I believe, a double champion, he might have been the tag champ with Edge at that point. I think he wrestled twice on that show, and he still wasn't the star of the show. So he got his couple months there, which is great, but then it's back to Triple H and Michaels, and of course Orton after that. So right back down to U.S. title status for you. Eddie Guerrero didn't want to handle the pressure of being the champion at the time, and they put it on. JBL ran with that until the torch is ready for Cena and Batista to take it the next year, which you could tell just even from developmental that as soon as they had those guys in OVW, they were like, this is our next crop of guys, Orton and Cena and Batista and whatever. So I see through their promotion, like the segments on Raw every week, it's Rock, Michaels, Triple H, Undertaker. Those are the guys that are getting all the hype. Well, even if you want to include Cena, because he's been the champion and been like, well, not the champion now, of course, but a million-time champion and been one of the top guys for a really long time now. So I don't know if you want to lump him in there. But all these guys from the Attitude Era are getting all the hype. Punk and Jericho are opening the show, and I know the opening match is a good slot to have. Yeah, whatever. It's not like it's going to be Brett and Owen, I don't think. Because at least when they did that, there was a reason that they were in the opener. I think they play up the opening match a little too much in terms of importance it actually has. The fact that it's for a world title, I just can't wrap my brain around. I'm sorry, just as an old school fan, there's just certain things that I can't get over like that. But like I said, in a year, we'll see. Because if these guys, like I've joked, Sheamus won the Royal Rumble for the right to mid-card WrestleMania. If these guys were really the big stars that they should be, if the torch was truly passed to them, then they would be the guys that when Rock comes back, we want to see him in Sheamus, we want to see him in The Miz, we want to see him in whatever it might be. It's really just Cena of that crop of people and no one else. So, I mean, I've talked about it a million times on the show, so what do you guys think? Will Brooks, you see Raw every Monday. What do you think about the idea of what you called the new generation 2.0, and yeah, they're both small and they both don't draw?
They got to put them in a position where fair weather fans can see these guys and go, wow, these guys are really good. I should watch these guys. Mm-hmm. That's what WrestleMania should be like. That's why Jericho has to put over CM Punk. And if they have a phenomenal match and CM Punk pulls out the victory, it's going to make CM Punk look fucking awesome, which is what they need and what we want to see. It's what you got to do. You got to put these guys in positions where they beat established stars and to show the people that they're the new guys. That's how you get new stars. You build them by they have to beat the old guys. Now, you can get over it without doing that too, but it makes life a lot easier when you beat older stars. So I don't follow these guys coming back to WrestleMania as long as they do the right thing.
Well, yeah, but they're coming back against each other for the most part.
They have a great crop of young stars that they should be promoting, but instead, I forgot the gentleman that was talking about it earlier, we hear Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and The Undertaker for 20 minutes at the end of Raw, week after week after week, when you have a champion like Daniel Bryan who barely gets any TV time and is just thrown into a match with Sheamus that it's hard for anybody to care about, other than the fact that Sheamus won the Royal Rumble and he wants to wrestle Daniel Bryan. If you didn't win the Royal Rumble or anything, you wouldn't know why the hell Sheamus is wrestling Daniel Bryan, because they don't put any emphasis on the new stars in their matches. They're just throwing the same old things that they think and that they know are going to get the ratings, and they're not putting any emphasis on the young new stars that they should be.
Well, let me clarify what I said about these guys don't draw. It was a cheap shot to make about the new generation because the wrestling was great, but business was down. Well, really, no one's a draw right now outside of like a few little blips on the radar. Like, first of all, with The Rock, I think there's obviously going to be a big buy rate for WrestleMania for him and Cena. Fine.
Mm-hmm.
You get the people who buy WrestleMania once a year and a few other people who see it on, I don't know, fucking TMZ or whatever they get their mainstream coverage from. I'm sure it'll do great because WrestleMania always does. But with Rock, I think there's what you call, I think the saying is the law of diminishing results, because last year when he showed up on, what was it, Valentine's Day or whatever Raw it was in February, big rating, especially for the next week. Well, he's on Raw every week now, and the ratings, if anything, there's a downward trend, not like it's a huge slope. It's just slowly going down every week. And even though they hype Raw, where Rock will be here at the end of the show, it still doesn't help.
Yeah,
and
but that also goes to what Will says. Everybody knows The Rock's going to be there, but what is he going to do? All he's going to do is talk. He's not special main event. The Rock is in the ring. If The Rock was wrestling on Monday Night Raw, just throw him in another tag match or a singles match, a nostalgic match. Put him in the ring against Dolph Ziggler.
I'm sure people will say instead you want to pay for them to see Rock's comeback match, even though they did Survivor Series, which leads me to the pay-per-views, because when I say these guys don't draw, I mean it's everybody, really. Everybody's not drawing, because Rock came back at Survivor Series, and it didn't really make that big of a difference. Yeah, the buys were up from the year before, but not by much. Certainly not by what they had hoped. Then you look at what they did last year. Pay-per-views were shit, right? Outside of WrestleMania. Excuse me?
Across the board, pay-per-views are down.
Right. So pay-per-views were shit, except what? Money in the Bank. That went up huge. And to me, when people are like, well, they needed to bring Punk back at SummerSlam because they needed it to capitalize on this hot angle and it was getting all this press and whatever, and it's the second biggest show of the year, we got to strike while the iron's hot, and it didn't do shit. But it's the same match. So what does that tell me? When all these pay-per-views with all their names like Cena and Orton and Punk and sometimes Triple H or whoever, I know Undertaker and Michaels and Batista and Jericho and all those guys and Mysterio aren't there, but all their big names that are there today were on all those shows and didn't draw much, except for that pay-per-view. So what does that tell me? Does that tell me that told a particular story that people liked? Does that tell me that story, the way they told it, got people into it, and all these others didn't? It's the same players, the same people involved.
I mean, wrestling isn't drawing.
But that time it did. So to me, outside of WrestleMania, of course, the one pay-per-view that does great, Money in the Bank, that just tells me, because it's the same people involved, that they did it in such a way that people felt like, you know what, I will part with my $55 or whatever the fuck it is this time. So
yeah, but again, for the pay-per-views, a lot of the stuff we've been getting for the past, say, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years have been the same storyline. I don't like you, and it's the same boring storyline, the same people over and over with CM Punk and John Cena. It was a fresh storyline. CM Punk cut a classic promo. It made people want to watch, and that's the difference between the Money in the Bank and the rest of the pay-per-views, because now everything's just being thrown together. They give them like 5-10 minutes on Monday Night Raw, and then they expect us to buy a pay-per-view. And that's shit. That's bullshit.
This is what happens when Triple H ruins an angle, man.
Ryan, are you back on?
Yes, I am.
All right. You want to chime in?
Money in the Bank was special because, I mean, let's be honest. You really shouldn't have a one-match show, but that was a one-match show. People wanted to see, because, I mean, people are going to tie CM Punk against McMahon to Oscar McMahon, but the point is that drew because it was something different. Nobody cared about Orton and Christian with the DQ switches the belt. They wanted to see what Punk was going to do and what he was going to do with the belt, what he was going to do with Cena, what he was going to do if he won the belt and left, because it was something different. We never had something like, I mean, outside of the whole Bret Hart 97 thing, we never had something like, oh, he's going to leave and he's going to take the belt with him. Or if they did have that, it hasn't been something that's been recent or relevant enough. So it's something that drew interest. But other than that, like everyone else has been saying, it's the same old stuff.
All right, let's shift gears and go to Royce in Pomona, California. If you were Brazilian, it'd be Royce, but you're on.
Yes, it was. I wanted to kind of talk about earlier when you were talking about how you tend to talk about MMA and on the show, and I kind of want to talk about how well, I'm not particularly like excited when you have the shows about it, because frankly I'm not that big of an MMA fan. I mean, I respect it, but I just couldn't get into it, so I could understand why some fans wouldn't really care to watch the show or listen to the radio. But I think it is important that you do talk about MMA in the fact that there's a lot of fans who, you say graduated, I say just switched over. That's
not my term. That's an actual term within UFC, at least as of a few years ago.
I know, but yeah. But like, you know how switch over and how there's a lot of fans now that who probably would have watched wrestling or maybe bought a WWE pay-per-view or just buying UFC pay-per-views or just MMA pay-per-views. So you could probably add that to the previous discussion you just had about how why pay-per-views, WWE pay-per-views tend to be down now. You get plus the repeating storylines and all that, but you can add the MMA influence. And there's a lot of fans, like little kid fans, who probably would have been into wrestling, like, are now getting into MMA because, like, the hypothetical question is, like, what if around 80s when Hogan was getting hot and Hulkamania and all that, what if MMA was as popular as it is now? Like, would that even, would WWE be in the place where it is now, or would you think so, or I don't know?
Well, it's two completely different times. Like, the closest that I could think of for back then would be Mike Tyson, but there weren't as many pay-per-views every month like it is now back then for both across the board. We have seen, first of all, UFC pay-per-views were down for the most part last year also after the Toronto show. But UFC's low numbers, WWE would kill to have for their B shows. But that being said, it is two completely different times, but I think to a degree, there are a lot of older fans like our demographic who grew up watching Hulk Hogan and into Attitude Era and whatever, and I think a lot of us have just gotten tired of waiting for wrestling to evolve, and that doesn't mean that wrestling has to become more MMA-like necessarily or anything like that. It's just that they haven't switched up the format in like 12, 13 fucking years. What we're feeling now with everyone complaining about PG, right? We're the forgotten generation. What we're feeling now is exactly what happened to the previous generation of WWF fans when Hulk Hogan came around. There was a whole generation of wrestling fans who grew up with Madison Square Garden and Bruno Sammartino, Billy Graham, and whatever, Andre. And guess what? When Hulk Hogan came around, fuck all you guys. They forgot about everything involving that shit. That's why when we were kids, when Hulk Hogan fought Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3, Andre was undefeated, never had been body slammed, and they never fought before. That's because they could get away with that shit back then. They had a fucking co-main event program at Shea Stadium underneath Zbyszko and Sammartino with Hogan and Andre. And just, 7, 8 years later, they pretended that never happened. And they could get away with it because the kids didn't know any better. Now, of course, there's the internet and a lot more resources for people to know. But when I was a kid and Texas Tornado Kerry Von Erich debuted in 1990, I just saw on 24/7 his MSG debut in 1980. They would pretend that Tito Santana was, a former tag team champion, but they meant with Rick Martel, not fucking 1970s WWF or whatever. Dino Bravo was just the guy with bleached blonde hair that Jimmy Hart managed, not the fucking Canadian champion in 1980 or whatever the fuck it was. There was a whole generation of fans that were forgotten. And guess what? That happened to us now. WWE is probably like, hey, if these guys are going to jump to MMA, fuck them. We're going to hook the kids while they're young so that way they don't get into the UFC when they get older. The difference is, though, kids can do martial arts when they're young. So, You have to wait till you're like 18, depending on the reputability of the wrestling school, to actually participate in pro wrestling. But maybe if they're not hooking the kids firsthand, I can tell you how MMA is taking away from pro wrestling later on. Because all these guys, like you were kind of inferring, who would become pro wrestlers, especially if Jim Ross was still the head of talent relations, the guys like Brock Lesnar or Kurt Angles or whoever.
Or The Rock.
Well, yeah, The Rock and Undertaker and all these sort of guys said, hey, if MMA was around back in my day, hey, maybe. But I mean in a legit way. They're sending like Gerald Briscoe to, when he's healthy, to scout at M1 Global and the NCAA tournament, whatever. That's rare for them now. For the most part, you see a lot of these FCW guys are really indie guys, Ring of Honor, Dragon Gate USA, whatever. But most of these guys who would probably become wrestlers now, it's not like back in the day where most of these wrestlers would be former amateur wrestlers like Dory Funk Jr., Jack Briscoe sort of types, or former football players like Wahoo McDaniel and whatever. Those guys are getting into MMA now. So it could have, and guys like Jack Swagger are more rare than the norm, but, or the exception to the rule, I would say. But I think that's a more concrete way that MMA is taking away from pro wrestling in that sense. But, hey, I just mentioned Brock Lesnar, and I wanted to follow up at least a little bit on one of our latest shows, which covered Brock Lesnar's career. He was former NCAA champion, WWE champion, and UFC champion. I doubt we'll ever see that again, Rod. But you weren't able to make it to our latest taping, so wanted to see if you had anything to say on our coverage of Brock Lesnar and his career.
I watched over the shows, and they're very good. I liked how the panel talked about what they thought when he first debuted, and maybe if Paul Heyman was necessary. Initial thought was, wow, like I just had a feeling that this guy was going to be a star just because he was so big and this guy was so intense, and he could move like a 120-pound gymnastic female. Like, he was just quick and agile. He's just like the way that they should debut a monster. Coming out of the crowd, you don't know anything about him. He's not coming through the ramp or whatever. He really just made an impact, and he made you excited for when is this guy going to come out and F5 Rikishi or something like that. As far as Paul Heyman goes, I thought he was absolutely vital as far as building Brock Lesnar up. I mean, Paul Heyman has just one of those rare mouthpieces that you don't get in wrestling today that can really take a guy and take him to the next level. I mean, look what he did for Rhino, just the gore itself. How high would Rhino's stock be if not for Paul Heyman's gore, gore, gore?
Well, what I meant by asking that was, don't you think the idea of Brock Lesnar, in and of itself, huge freak athlete destroying people, was enough and a simple of enough idea to get over on its own without him as a mouthpiece? I enjoyed him, too, as Brock Lesnar's manager or agent, whatever cute euphemism they like to call it. Food for thought is, would Lesnar have been able to get over on his own?
No, because I feel like that's what they do now, is bring these huge tattooed guys and think that them beating up just random people is going to take them over. Sure, he might have been popular, but without Paul Heyman, I don't think he would have got to that next level so quickly. And the fact that he had such a great mouthpiece for a great athlete, I thought it was just one of those perfect combinations. Almost reminded me, I mean, not in the sense of a monster, but like Bobby Heenan and Mr. Perfect. He had a great mouthpiece and the perfect athlete. I mean, Mr. Perfect could talk, but the two of them
Brock
together. Two of them. I mean, Brock could talk as a heel, but not like Paul Heyman.
Not with that voice. I don't think we should have ever heard his voice.
I just thought it was just a great combination that really helped them skyrocket into that main event status.
Well, speaking of skyrocketing, you kind of touched upon it, Orlando, and I just wanted to hear you flesh it out a bit because it was kind of in passing, but you said he got too much too soon, and that's what you hear about Brock a lot and guys like Lashley and why they're so hesitant now to put a lot of investment into a lot of these guys because, well, we put a lot behind him and had a lot of big plans for him and spent a lot of money in Brock's case, and then they quit after a couple of years and go into MMA. Fuck it. So do you think that Brock was a case of too much too soon?
Definitely. He was a case of too much too soon. I mean, if you listen to his interviews now, like, you could tell that he was talking about being burnt out. I mean, he was only on the road for, 2 years, and after 2 years, he called it quits because it was too much for him. I mean, if you look at the era where we were watching wrestling, like, say, the Attitude Era or the Hogan era, the people that were on top worked their way to the top. They worked their way through the territories, the tag team ranks, the mid-card, to work their way to the top. So when they were at the top, they wanted to stay at the top. They knew what life on the road was like. But nowadays, they're throwing these young kids into major roles and trying to push them to the moon when they have no idea what to expect. And I think that's kind of what happened with Brock Lesnar.
Do you think that might have had a bad effect? Because, hell, we were just complaining about them not pushing young guys in a true sense before. Do you think this could be the residuals of that, Will Brooks, where maybe the reason they've been hesitant since essentially christening Cena and Batista and Orton, which happened right after Brock, do you think that maybe that's part of the reason that outside of that crop of guys, they've been kind of hesitant with pushing a lot of these guys into beyond the mid-card, the Carlitos, the Benjamins, and others who have since gone? Do you think that might have something to do with guys like Lesnar and Lashley leaving?
Well, I don't think you have to worry about Carlito joining the UFC anytime soon. But
I don't mean that. But
I just mean, no, you know what, though? It's a chance you got to take because they made a lot of money with Brock. They made money with Lashley. They made not as much as they did with Brock. But with Brock Lesnar, they made a lot of money, if nothing else, in pay-per-view buys, because he was a draw. And so, yeah, you could take a bitch all you want, like, oh, he left us early, but he made a lot of money while he was there. So if that's the fear. If the fear is making money, then you know what? They're in the wrong business.
If that's the fear, fuck it, because you know what? If it was only on TV for 2 years, I'll take 2 Brock Lesnar years over 1,000 Bob Holly years. As far as his MMA career, Rod, I thought we brought up an interesting point on whether he got lucky in the sense of the timing of when he came into the division because of how the division was as far as the shape of it goes, with it kind of being a little all over the place. So do you think we had a valid point there? And do you think that because he did, for many of his fights, originally have a different opponent than what he ended up fighting, do you think he would have succeeded if he had fought the opponents that he originally was intended to? Do you think he would have succeeded against other people other than what he fought at the time?
Absolutely. I don't think that he was really lucky. I think he just came at a time when the heavyweight division wasn't that deep. So he pretty much created his own luck. No one told him to join the most prominent mixed martial arts promotion after one fight. He wanted to go in there. He saw where he had to go to make a name, where he had to go to fight the best competition. Fighting Frank Mir in your second fight is not luck. I don't care what anybody says. Your second pro fight, you're fighting Frank Mir. I don't know how lucky you can get, or how that constitutes as luck. I think if he would have fought Mark Coleman, he would have finished him in the first round. I think he would have smashed Chet Congo. Any of his original opponents. I mean, the only one I don't think he would have beaten is Junior Dos Santos, but he was already a champion at that point already. No, I don't think he was lucky. I think he just came at a good time, and he really just helped make that heavyweight division and give him more credibility than it was, instead of watching Tim Sylvia and Artur Arlovsky dance around for 5 rounds, and now you got this huge guy, Brock Lesnar. And there was just so much intrigue and interest. We knew he was a great athlete, and we all thought, man, imagine if this guy's UFC. Well, here you go. The dream has come true. Let's see what he got. And before I talked about star-making performances, and his first match against Frank Mir, even though he lost, I thought it was a star-making performance because people saw that, wow, this guy's really legit. He really took it to Frank Mir and lost in a rookie move, but he still gave a good fight and really showed that he could hang in there with the top elite fighters.
I only regret that they didn't have one more Tim Sylvia fight. They let him go from his contract with one fight on it left, I believe, and I was really hoping Brock would send him on his way.
Oh, that would have been great. I looking back at that, I wish that too.
One of the questions I brought up was, and Orlando mentioned how his camp Death Clutch is pretty closed in and of itself in Minnesota, like Brock was staying in his comfort zone. Now, we know they did bring in Pat Barry at some point, so he's a world-class kickboxer, so we at least saw he had some variety in his camp, but do you think there just wasn't enough? I know we heard he got up to at least a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Not that we got to see it very much, because it seemed to me like the strategy going into every fight he had was ground and pound. So do you think that it was smart to do that? Was adding variety pointless for him because his strength was his size? Use his 265 whatever plus pounds to take down his opponent with his wrestling background and then pound them out with those cement blocks he has for fists. Do you think that he shouldn't have even bothered with variety? What do you think about his whole approach to training and his camps?
That was one thing. I mean, I didn't criticize him because he made it successful and made it a...
Well, he did win more fights than he lost.
Right. He was very inexperienced in fighting the best guys in the world, but I feel like he could have evolved better if he went to one of the bigger camps. I mean, can you imagine what Brock Lesnar would be like after a Greg Jackson camp, or even to go in MMA and going against other really top-level UFC athletes? Like Pat Barry is a great kickboxer, but he's not a great kickboxer and wrestler. I want to see if he was training with guys like Daniel Cormier, like Olympic-level wrestlers. And yeah,
well, he did have Cole Conrad in his camp, but he's also a huge heavyweight NCAA wrestler. It's not like GSP where he goes, I need to work on my boxing, and then he goes with Freddie Roach. It's not like he goes to Renzo Gracie School in New York for jiu-jitsu. It seems like, as far as learning a variety, GSP looks more like the standard to me than Death Clutch.
Yeah, and you know what the thing was, Eric, is that I felt like, I mean, I don't know anything about what, I mean, I've heard some things just through radio shows or whatever, but I feel like the training camp everything was on Brock's terms. So if he was tired, it was the end of the day. If he was sparring with someone and he got hit in the face, I heard that he would close down shop for the day. Just from seeing Brock, we know that he's an intense guy and he wants things his way. So I think he really should have went to a camp and really evolved with other top-level fighters. Not saying that Cole Conrad isn't a top-level fighter, but
Bellator heavyweight champion.
He's still very young in itself. He's a heavyweight champion, but he's still learning.
Just starting.
Exactly. So I think he really should have went to different training camps and really got to spar with different athletes, different boxers, and just really get to see just to fill the holes in his game. I think that's really what he needed to do instead of bringing in one or two guys who are kickboxers and say that he's expanding his game.
His game plan, ground and pound, I mean, if that worked for him, then but still, you bring in, like, variables. You bring in the kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, not so you can fight with it so much, but so you can fight against it. I mean, we
saw what happened when he tried standing with Alistair Overeem.
Oh, absolutely. You saw what happened when he tried to... Honestly, you saw what happened when he tried to stand up against most people. He had the mean right straight, but that's pretty much it. I mean, he was a great competitor. I disagree with Rodney about the luck thing, just because when I say lucky, I mean, I think as you brought up, if Brock Lesnar debuted right now, he wouldn't have risen as fastly as he did, if he would have risen at all, because the heavyweight division is so much deeper now. Mm-hmm. So in a way, I'd say that is kind of lucky. Frank Mir being a great opponent aside, I think if he did get through Frank Mir, then the Shane Carwins, the Cain Velasquez, the Junior Dos Santos, the Alistair Overeem, the Verdums, I think that would have been too much for Brock to just overcome and say, hey, third fight in, I'm fighting for the championship.
Well, at the same time, if he debuted, I think it would be at least 4 or 5 fights before he fought someone the caliber of Frank Mir. So it would be a different story.
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly. What I'm saying is, when I say lucky, I mean
4 fights in, he wouldn't be heavyweight champion. So I think he was lucky as in he came in at a good time. I think that much we can all agree on is he came in at a good time to join the heavyweight division. Really sad, got to say I agree with one big point in your last show, Eric, was that I'm really sad that I'm never going to have that feeling of we're never going to have another Brock Lesnar fight to get excited about. And that really still
it hurts. It sucks.
It does. It really does. I mean, I'll admit it, Brock Lesnar was, as many people, Brock Lesnar was what got me into UFC. But after I got into watching that, I started going back, started watching all the fights, started watching Griffin Bonner, started watching some Pride, started watching pretty much Strikeforce, WEC.
You did your homework.
Absolutely. And this is all because Brock Lesnar was the guy that piqued my interest enough to get into UFC. So that's pretty much what Lesnar's career meant to me, and I'm just sad to see it end. Really would have liked to see another fight against Frank Mir, not because I thought it would be competitive, but just because I like seeing Frank Mir getting his ass kicked. But that's pretty much all my thoughts on Lesnar's MMA career.
Cool. So, Rod, any favorite matches and moments in particular you wanted to highlight from either Lesnar's pro wrestling or MMA years?
A bunch of people said in the panel, but definitely the Rock match at SummerSlam. It's very intense. I think it was just one of those SummerSlams, one of those matches, I should say, that had a great build-up to the main event, and it really lived up to its height. I mean, it was a great show, and it really was the icing of the cake, and that finish was just amazing. Also, actually, him winning the King of the Ring, I thought was big, too, because that really kind of solidified it. Here's this monster, and he's going to be your next main eventer. And also, I mean, not so much a Brock moment, but since he was involved, him and Eddie Guerrero, I thought was a great match. And like you mentioned on the show, it shows how he could work with the smaller guys, too, like him and Rey Mysterio, and still get good matches out of them. So,
yeah, and like I said, it wasn't squashes. It wasn't he, like, just F5'd the shit out of, or belly-to-belly the shit out of Shannon Moore on SmackDown over the top rope or whatever. These guys, these smaller guys, were telling two different stories. First of all, the Mysterio match on SmackDown was more of an evasive sort of thing, like Mysterio trying to use his speed and quickness against the big monster, and Brock eventually catching him. And with the Guerrero one, even if the story is like Brock didn't want to drop the belt to Eddie and all that shit. Okay, I did mention the Goldberg run-in, but of course they wanted to build toward WrestleMania 20, and even though Goldberg ran in, the good part about it was it did not affect the finish. It still put over Eddie. And what was great about Brock is he had that credibility where he could put you in a rear waist lock and something almost benign looking if anybody else had done it, but we know his background. We know his legit credibility, and that made it seem like a legit rest hold, if you want to call it that. And Eddie succeeded where Ray did not, I guess, in using his wits and his quickness to outdo Lesnar, and eventually he won the title. So that was a real good moment for him to overcome Brock Lesnar. But I did mention in passing the Hogan match, and what I love about the Hogan match is not only was it Hogan putting over Brock and putting him over in a very cool way with the bear hug where he's choking Hogan out or squeezing the life out of Hogan like so many heels did in the 80s, Andre and Stud and all these other guys. So it was reminiscent of that, but Hogan's coughing up blood and he loses consciousness, and Brock just looked like a fucking vicious beast afterwards. And what was great, too, is him wiping the blood of Hogan on his chest and all this stuff. This was still hype for the match with The Rock. Because Rock and Hogan were buddy-buddy now, and Brock shows up on Raw. You may remember wearing the Hulkamania shirt afterwards because he took out Rock's buddy. And, oh, man, the hype going into Rock and Brock was such a great thing. And also reminds me that Brock Lesnar is the only person on Earth to hold a victory over Hulk Hogan and Randy Couture.
And he holds victory over The Rock, so he beat both Scorpion Kings. But yeah, I mean, think about the impact that Brock made in this 2 years. I don't think any wrestler has made the impact on pro wrestling as Brock Lesnar. I mean, we could go from matches to moments. The scary F5 at WrestleMania 19, the SummerSlam rematch between him and Angle, which I thought was a better match, and even on, I'm pretty sure, SmackDown in 2002, when Randy Orton version 1 faced off against Brock Lesnar, and he tried going for that high cross body. Brock caught him, flipped backwards, turned to F5, and man, was out. I think right there, I was like, man, this guy is different. This guy really knows how to put on a show. As far as MMA goes, definitely my favorite moment was him and Shane Carwin. The second round. First round was too scary to watch. The second round, it was intense. You really didn't know what was going to happen because Brock was out for a year and Shane Carwin's on this roll, and the two huge guys, and we know Shane Carwin's punching power, but at that point we didn't see Brock Lesnar take too many punches. So we really didn't see how Shane was going to react, and man, was it not good. But the ending of that was it just really solidified Brock as a true heavyweight. Now he belongs in the upper echelon of the UFC.
All right. Any thoughts on the year in review? Any thoughts on show of the year, perhaps, or how UFC's grown in the past year?
I think they've done a lot between the Fox deal and the WC merger and acquiring Strikeforce. It's been a pretty big year. The Toronto show. My favorite show of the year would probably have to be
140.
132.
Okay.
I would say 132. I thought it was just with the favorite Cruz fight. I thought it was awesome, and Tito getting the win, and Carlos Condit knocked out. I thought that was just an awesome show. Fighter of the year, John Jones, definitely. I don't think it has dominated of that. Fight of the year, it's going to go to the first main event of the year for me. I think you said this too, but yeah, Edgar Maynard 2, without a doubt, was
there for it.
Yeah, and it was such a great fight because no one was really expecting it to be that much of a fight, and I thought that Maynard had it in the beginning, and the way Frankie came back and the athleticism and the fact that these guys were nonstop for the next 25 minutes, it just proved that this is what fighting is all about. This is what the UFC is all about, and these guys put all their heart on the line.
I'll stick with Money in the Bank. It's really the only show I really cared about this year, for obvious reasons. No complaints there.
Well, I think a lot of WWE fans were surprised with Vengeance and how that turned out to be a better show than people thought. That was the one with Mark Henry and Big Show recreating the ring breaking, I believe, and a few other things. As far as wrestling goes, I think Bound for Glory, up until the main event, which was rushed and had the wrong winner, of course, was a really good show, featuring, of course, the Hogan and Sting match, but everything else on the show was pretty good for the most part. Best in the World by ROH, the iPay-per-view from New York, had the awesome Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards title match. Undercard was pretty good. I think the four-way tag match was a little long, but hey, I at least got to co-host some of the pre-show with Kevin Kelly, so it's a sentimental favorite for me, of course, but the main event stands out above all.
140's got to be my show of the year for MMA show of the year. I mean, as much as I like seeing Frank Mir get his ass kicked, I love seeing guys getting their arms broken. That sounds really sadistic. I really regret saying. But I also like Chan Sung Jung's fastest knockout in MMA history or UFC history.
It's tied, I believe, but it's up there, yeah.
Right. And I really like the John Jones Machida fight because Jones actually looked a little challenged until he nailed one elbow and saw Machida bleeding. He's like, all right, this guy's human. He's dead. Which segues me to John Jones. Got to be my fighter of the year. 4 fights, 3 title fights against 3 former champions. Nothing groundbreaking. This fight of the year has got to be Shogun Hendo, honestly. I mean, what a story that told of. Just because 90% of the punches that Hendo landed on Shogun would have knocked out anyone else. Those are the punches that knocked out Fedor. Over on the wrestling side, CM Punk, Wrestler of the Year, CM Punk, John Cena, Match of the Year, Money in the Bank, Pay-Per-View of the Year. there's pretty much a theme going there. Nothing really going on other than that. I mean, I will say John Morrison was my letdown of the year. I really thought in the very beginning of January, I thought he was going somewhere. Now look where he is now. Seriously, where is he? Can someone tell me?
Philippines, I think. Or wrestling over in the UK. Actually, we've done a lot of news updates where we've previewed some of the places he's been, but yeah, maybe not groundbreaking, but as far as show of the year, we didn't cover that for MMA either. I think UFC 134 in Rio, the return to Brazil for the first time in a long time, was a great way to come back, not just with Big Nog Nogueira getting his 40th win in his career, but of course the main event with Yushin Okami losing to Anderson Silva. It was almost like a clean sweep for Brazilians and just a great card and a great crowd. It was awesome. But 139 also, which had the main event of Dan Henderson and Shogun Rua, as everyone's mentioned, also had Uriah Faber, and this fight that I just loved, the debut of Kung Lee in UFC in the middleweight division against the axe murderer Wanderlei Silva. I did not expect Silva to win, but he did. It was only a couple rounds, but an awesome fight. And if not those, the Strikeforce, at least first round of the Heavyweight World Grand Prix over in the Izod in New Jersey, which most of us attended, was an awesome night. Didn't end well with Bigfoot Silva destroying Fedor, which, oh man, if that round had gone a few more seconds, maybe he would have gotten that heel hook or knee bar on Bigfoot and maybe gotten the tap out. That was his only chance to win, but he was dominated, and really I could understand the fight being stopped after he got his orbital socket destroyed. But other than that, like a whole night of great heavyweights, and we're going to see a lot of those guys, Chad Griggs, Shane Del Rosario, etc., debut in UFC soon. So let's go to some calls while we have the time. We have a 915 number. Name and location, please.
This is Frank, Tacoma, Washington.
Hey, Frank in Tacoma, Washington. What's up?
Just a quick comment before my question. This is my first live radio show, and I love it, guys. Keep it up.
Thank you very much.
But what do you guys think of the Daniel Bryan, Sheamus buildup?
What buildup?
Exactly. Maybe a third party, Randy Orton, should have been inserted. I think it's just been a total waste. Fair time.
Some people have been saying that Santino should be inserted in it, because I think everyone's saying that The Miz might be inserted somehow into the main event, like he'll do a run-in at the end or some shit. But I think people are more caught up in Daniel Bryan's heel shtick right now, not so much with AJ, but with the yes. People seem to really be coming around on Daniel Bryan and liking a lot of the heel stuff he's into. Sheamus, I mean, people buy him, I think. It just seems... Well, there you go. So what do you think, Ryan, of the Sheamus-Daniel Bryan match? Not getting enough focus, perhaps?
I said this in the chat room earlier. The thing about it is it's all about the build. When you're building something, you want to build up like a building, elevate the tension, elevate the excitement. But what they're doing is they're building a bridge. They're just from
a bridge to nowhere.
They're just from Elimination Chamber when they announced that Sheamus and Bryan are competing. They're just building straight to WrestleMania. There's nothing to excite us. They're not adding anything to it. Along the way, we're getting some decent matches. I mean, Punk and Bryan have had 20 matches since then. Sheamus is putting on some good matches against people like Ziggler, but throughout the entire time, we're just sitting there going, all right, why should I care? And WWE is just, turning back into thing because it's at WrestleMania, which I'm really disappointed. They're not even bringing up the whole U.S. title match. They're not bringing up the fact that, they were supposed to be at WrestleMania last year for a title, but of course they don't want us to remember this because they pushed it off the card. Mm-hmm. Just disappoining all around.
Wait, how would they mention that? Hey, guess what, guys? We fucked up last year. Here's the match we should have showed you last year. I mean, how would you even how would you even build that?
Well, they ended up doing it just on the pre-show, and it turned into a lumberjack match or battle royal.
I think it was a battle royal. But at the very least, you bring up that Sheamus has defeated Bryan for a title before. I don't think they've brought that up even once. Mm-hmm. Yet whenever Randy Orton seems to have a feud with someone like Kane or CM Punk, they'll stretch back to random matches way back in 2008. But no, nobody wants to remember
U.S. title match that happened on Raw a year ago.
It's the same company that hasn't mentioned the fact that this is the third WrestleMania that Undertaker and Triple H are facing. They just want to talk about last year. So.
Jamal in California, you are on.
Yes, I want to call in regarding Brock Lesnar's career. Did any of you mention the new submission Brock Lesnar introduced against he will not speak of on that one SmackDown, the Brock Lock, that half Boston Crab stretch muffler hybrid?
Love that move.
That I love the hell out of that move. It looked so painful. It's like at the time the submission move I don't think anyone could break out of.
It's only a shame that he introduced it so late in his run because that could have led to some really cool transitions and near falls, so to speak, in some of his earlier matches, especially with Kurt Angle.
Yes, I agree. And I find it humorous that not only Brock, but Batista did that with the Batista bite, but that's another story. And I always thought that submission move was great, and I can't believe none of the big guys ever bothered using it. And I was very, very disappointed putting in WWE 12, looking at Brock Lesnar's moveset, and it is not even in the game. It's like, what the hell? Instead, they have this bastardized version of the House of Pain. Regarding the year in review, I'd like to say thanks to everyone involved with the Wrestling Roundtable discussion board awards and everything. Zach, Bill, Corey, and I will get the complete list of Wrestling Roundtable awards.
And you can sign up at WrestlingRoundtable.com. Thank you, Jamal. We have about 5 minutes left to air, but I see a lot of you are on the line, so the solution is overtime. Just stay on the line. If you want to listen to Overtime live, call 347-857-4647, and we're going to make sure all of you get your voices heard. Aaron from Maryland, I believe, you are on.
I'm glad that Jamal posted about the Wrestling Roundtable year-end awards thing. Thank you very much. And I like to post up about 2 topics I like to go in depth about. Of course, from the last show that you guys did from the year-end review, and talking about Brock Lesnar's career, mainly just for me personally in wrestling. I could go into MMA, but I just want to, cover the broad scope that everybody wants to talk about. MMA, I think definitely for me, my fight of the year would be Shogun versus Rua at UFC 139. Of course, that would be the general the thing that everybody votes for fight of the year. For a match of the year for pro wrestling in general, Suwama versus Jun Akiyama from All Japan in October 2011. Now, let me go a little bit in depth and detail you guys about this match for those people who don't know and don't know about international wrestling. You have this guy, Akiyama Jun, who had been...
Oh, you said it the Japanese way.
Yeah, I said it the Japanese way. All right. So, for those who don't know, Mr. Jun Akiyama had been a legend in All Japan, just started coming up through the rest of the big stars in Japan. And when All Japan split and became Pro Wrestling Noah, of course, All Japan stayed with their Japan thing. When Akiyama split and joined up with Noah, that he became arguably the biggest thing in their company, and arguably bigger than the Japanese legend at that time, and Mr. Mitsuharu Misawa. And when he came into this match, or Kobashi, yes indeed, that when he came into this match, that Akiyama had been so broken down, the fact that he had so many injuries going down, but he can still go, and you have his opponent, Suwama, who at the time was the All Japan Ace, who have held the championship for over a year. And the fact that with Akiyama not winning the Triple Crown title was a huge thing for him to win, because it would put on that high pedestal of the Japanese legends that he never, ever got to be in the spotlight with. And overall, this match was amazing. I encourage all of you to view this match as best way as you can. Akiyama winning, personally for me, was moment of the year, because I was a big, huge Akiyama fan, and because the match was so important to Japan and probably the world over, who wanted to thank Akiyama Jun for winning the Triple Crown title. Okay,
and he still is the Triple Crown champion. I think, in fact, All Japan's angle pretty much right now is all their belts are held by foreigners. And that's still going on. And we have about a minute and a half left, Aaron, so hold the line and we'll get to more in overtime. But Orlando, you're back.
Yes, I am.
Let's talk about the 10th anniversary first, and we'll get to the rest of the calls. But if you want to listen to the overtime portion of the show, Don't wait till it's on YouTube or available immediately after the broadcast on Blog Talk Radio. If you want to listen and call in, 347-857-4647. We've got about 45 seconds left till we go into overtime. So hold the line, everyone who is on the phone, and we'll get to all your voices when we can. Orlando, first up, we're going to get to you and Ring of Honor's 10th anniversary show in about 20 more seconds.
Okay. Feel all excited.
You could do our theme if you want, Will Brooks. All right, we are in overtime now on Blog Talk Radio, so thank you for holding. And if you're listening to us on YouTube, you're listening way after the fact. So you want to call in whenever we're doing this, 347-857-4647. Now, Orlando, you're back on. Your phone died, so thanks for calling back in because I wanted to hear about Ring of Honor's 10th anniversary show, which was recently in the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City on iPay-per-view, Go Fight Live. We are also on Go Fight Live, and if you want to order Go Fight Live pay-per-views, you can do that through our site. Go through the video/audio tab and all the way down on matches, click right there, scroll down, and you've got the Go Fight Live players. So if you want to order the replay of the 10th anniversary show, please do it through that. But how was it, Orlando? Should these people order it?
When I ordered the tickets before any matches were available, and then leading up to the show as the matches were being announced, I was very underwhelmed. I've been going to Ring of Honor shows for about 7 years now, and I think this card was probably the most underwhelming leading up to it. But once the show started, ROH put on a hell of a show. I mean, the undercard was pretty awesome. They started off with the All Night Express against Wrestling's Greatest Tag Team. Really good show. Titus looked good. His knee injuries, he's doing a lot better. They got the win over World's Greatest Tag Team. And next was Mike Bennett and Maria. Oh, man, she looks awesome. Against Homicide. And, of course, we're in New York, so you know Homicide's going to be super over. The match was nice and short, nice good brawl, about 7-8 minutes. And next was, I think, the match of the night. The House of Truth, Michael Elgin and Roderick Strong against T.J. Perkins and Amazing Red.
That was match of the night.
Yes, for me. That was TJP and Amazing Red flying all over the place for the House of Truth was awesome. Some of the spots they did, I can't come up with any off the top because I've been going through wrestling overload, going to a whole bunch of shows, but that to me I remember was my match of the night.
Did Red get a lot of reaction being he's if you want to call it ROH original?
Yes, definitely. At the end of the match, a lot of people were chanting, "Please come back, Amazing Red hasn't lost a step." They also did a segment during the show where they had Kevin Kelly interview Eddie Kingston. He was representing Chikara as the champion, and since ROH and Chikara are doing a co-promotional show in Chicago, so they were kind of trying to promote that, which Kevin Steen interrupted and wanted Eddie Kingston to take over Chikara, and he'll take over ROH, and then so that they could both mold it to what he wants, and Eddie Kingston didn't like that, blah, blah, blah. They got into an altercation. A lot of the Chikara guys came out, the Colony and Jigsaw. It was pretty fun, pretty good. After that was Jay Lethal against Tommaso Ciampa. I really wasn't looking forward to this match.
Did you think it was going to be a title switch?
I think I did because I had read the spoilers somewhere and they didn't have Jay Lethal with the title, so I did think it was going to be a switch. It went to a draw, and the match was great. They put on a nice classic. It felt like one of those old school WCW, NWA TV title matches where a whole bunch of false finishes at the end, and then it wound up going into a draw, but the match was great. I think they should have gave them another 5 minutes so we could get a definitive winner, but I guess they're actually trying to push an angle with these two now. The Briscoes and the Young Bucks, pretty good match, decent match, kind of what we're used to with them. They didn't do anything too over the top. Then we had Kevin Steen against Jimmy Jacobs. Kevin Steen just simply demolishes Jacobs. You could tell the crowd was mostly all there for Steen. Jacobs didn't really get that much of a reaction. But, yeah, Steen just totally killed Jacobs to much of the fans' delight. So everything up to that, the show was really good. It was going really smooth. The matches didn't feel too long like a lot of the other shows I've been to. But the main event, which was Adam Cole and Eddie Edwards against Davey Richards and Kyle O'Reilly, I was hoping that this turned out to be a great match, that the young guys have proved themselves. It just ended up like another Davey and Eddie match where they kick out of a million finishers and they kick each other in the head a million times. They played the same spot 3 times in a row where everybody in the ring gets laid out and then Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly get up staggering and then they go face to face and start striking each other back and forth. They did that same thing 3 different times. And in my head I'm like, what the hell? Like, the match went for about 45 minutes. They could have cut 20 minutes of that match, made it a 20, 25-minute match, and it would have made more sense than what they were doing.
See, because I think going into this, a lot of people, myself included, were upset or disappointed that the main event involved the world champion, but in a tag match.
Yes.
Like, this did not seem 10th anniversary worthy. You don't
have
a 10th
not at all.
You don't have a 10th anniversary every year. Of course, All Japan and New Japan are having 40th anniversary shows right now, so it's put in perspective. But Ring of Honor having a 10th anniversary is a pretty big deal because being the, quote, number 3 promotion in the country, ECW didn't get to 10 years. So it's kind of a big deal for them. And this did not scream anniversary main event, let alone 10th anniversary.
I've been to anniversary shows for ROH where they had Nigel McGuinness and Daniel Bryan or Nigel McGuinness versus Kenta. Before, ROH would do as much as they can to put on a big show for one of their biggest shows of the year, and it feels like ROH really just, I don't think it's that they don't care, but they're not really doing as much as they should be to making the fans want to care.
It should have been Steen and Davey, straight up.
Yes. Oh, yeah. But the problem, I think, with ROH now is they're kind of using that old school mentality of like maybe 70s NWA where they want to prolong something and make the fans clamor for it, so that, because I know they probably want Steen and Davey for probably Final Battle.
It's not going to be that long, but it's not going to be that immediate either.
Yeah, but still, this is something that's hot right now. Give it to us. You could always do a rematch with these two. It's not like these two have been in the ring that often one-on-one for ROH events. They put on great matches in PWG, which is one of the reasons why I picked Steen for my Wrestler of the Year, going through all of his matches in PWG last year.
Yeah, because PWG capitalizes on Ring of Honor, or at least matchups that Ring of Honor should be doing, and they're not.
Yes, definitely. The main event, it was pretty bad.
That's
for
funny
me,
because I read a lot of reports saying that it ended up being better than expected, and of course the idea was to put over the new star. I think Adam Cole got the pinfall.
Adam Cole on Davey.
Right, so that was the idea at the very least. But at the same time, it's still, like you were saying, because you're not alone. Most Ring of Honor fans are saying the same thing, that this isn't what we wanted, and we're spending our money elsewhere for the most part.
Yeah, I think I might hold off on going to a Ring of Honor show until I see Davey and Steen, because you know it's inevitable, and you know it's going to happen. I just don't know when. I mean, I support Ring of Honor. I like the product. I don't want to see Eddie Edwards and Davey Richards again.
Enough of them main eventing New York, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
give us something new.
Speaking of New York, you did go to the Madison Square Garden house show the other day, didn't you?
Oh, yes. Yes.
So you got the privilege of seeing WWE COO HHH in action.
Oh, man. Funny story, guys, because Eric actually texted me. I texted him to tell him that I was at the show, and he goes, you get the honor of seeing Triple H. And right as soon as he texted me that, Triple H's entrance was coming out, so I took a picture of Triple H and sent it to Eric. It was pretty funny.
Well, you know why I said that? Because I may have even sent it to you. I got an email newsletter from Prudential Center, because they're in the area. They're in Newark tonight, I think, and they were in Wells Fargo the other night. So WWE's touring the area, right? And they promoted this a SmackDown, which was tonight at The Rock, as it's called, funny enough, the Prudential Center, promoting Triple H above everybody, like, see WWE COO Triple H in action. I'm like, oh boy.
The show was actually pretty fun. I mean, I texted you because the highlight of my night was they had Mason Ryan came out. Oh man, I was so freaking pissed. I was like, who the hell is he gonna wrestle? Well, I don't want to watch this. And then Alberto Del Rio came out, and I was happy to see him because he hasn't been on TV. And I'm telling you, it was maybe a little over a minute, and Alberto Del Rio put him in an arm bar, and he tapped out, and I jumped out of my seat just watching Mason Ryan get squashed in a minute.
Who was the face in that?
Nobody. Oh, Mason Ryan. Mason Ryan was the face.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, but the show was pretty good. The opening match was Miz and Zack Ryder, and of course Zack Ryder was crazy over. A lot of kids dressed up like him. They put on a pretty good match. Ryder went over. The tag champs, Epico and Primo, faced Kofi Kingston and R-Truth. That was a pretty good match also, where R-Truth had pinned Primo, but Primo had his foot on the bottom rope, but the ref didn't see it, so everybody thought, oh, we had new tag champs, and then John Laurinaitis came out, no, I want to restart the match, and of course the heels win somehow. The same thing happened with Jack Swagger and Santino Marella. Jack Swagger pinned Santino Marella, but Marella had his foot on the rope, and everybody thought we had a new U.S. champion, and John Laurinaitis came out clapping. He didn't say anything. And then Teddy Long came out and said, no, 5 more minutes, and then Santino won. The show, it went really smooth. The matches were nice, fast. Everybody did their thing in the ring. Then we had Triple H, CM Punk, and Randy Orton against Dolph Ziggler, Cody Rhodes, and Chris Jericho. Of course, the crowd went crazy for Jericho. The crowd was really crazy. I think CM Punk had Triple H had the loudest pop of the night. And then next to him, I think, is a tie between CM Punk and John Cena. They put on a really good match, and they showed some of the highlights on Raw where Triple H put Ziggler in the tombstone, where the crowd went pretty crazy for that. And the main event was a last man standing match with John Cena and Kane. They did a couple table spots. John Cena did the the attitude adjustment on Kane through the table for the 10 count. It was a last man standing match, and the crowd went home happy. I had a fun time, and it was great seeing a lot of the families there and a lot of the kids.
Cool, I'm glad you
had much different atmosphere than an ROH show.
I'm sure. But thanks for letting us know that, Orlando, and thanks for calling back when your phone died. I appreciate that. And this is for everyone in the chat room.
Stop it. Stop it.
Your request is fulfilled. And now let's go to the calls once again. Aaron in Maryland, do you have anything more you want to say?
Yes, for Show of the Year for Professional Wrestling, PWG's All-Star Weekend 8 Night 2, which would be my Professional Wrestling American Match of the Year with Chris Hero versus Akira Tozawa. You think maybe going into this match when you view it on your DVD player or whatever device you play your DVDs on, you figure like you want to view that specific match, and you feel like, this is pretty short. And it's like, I'm not sure this is going to be the match of the year. But it's like when you view that match, you'll be amazed because I know they faced each other at PWG's Battle of Los Angeles 2010, and this was supposedly Tozawa's last match in America before he went back over to Dragon Gate. And these two guys put on a wrestling clinic. It was very emotional, and Hero putting over Tozawa was awesome. And that rest of the card was pretty phenomenal as well, with guys like Kevin Steen, guys like Claudio, Loki. That show was just phenomenal. And getting back to what you said about the Brock Lesnar topic, I think my favorite personal Brock Lesnar match would be his match against Undertaker in the Hell in a Cell at No Mercy 2002. Because I know I love, as much as you do, the Rock match at SummerSlam 2002. But the Taker match solidified it for me that Brock was the true, legit badass in the company. And it's true that one of the few times that you can see Undertaker job clean to a legit threat guy, and that guy was Brock Lesnar. And that shot at him at the end of the show, going on top of the cell with the WWE title, was pretty spectacular. My favorite Brock Lesnar moment in wrestling was, of course, would probably have to be his debut with WWE, of course, coming in during the night after WrestleMania 18 in Montreal, coming in during that hardcore match, and beating up Maven, Al Snow, and Spike Dudley, and that double powerbomb that he gives him was pretty vicious. And I was shocked that all people find out that Paul Heyman was his manager, and figured that Paul Heyman was gone from the company, and figured that he came back, and it was like, what in the hell is going on? And it's like you wanted to find out about this guy. And so of course, I'm not necessarily sure I have a favorite Brock Lesnar MMA fight, but I think my favorite moment of him was, of course, probably his first MMA fight. I think it was against Frank Mir. Can you correct me on that, Eric?
Well, that was, everyone keeps saying his first fight. It was his first UFC fight.
Yeah.
And his first actual fight, now that you mention it, was against Min Soo Kim out in K1 Dynamite in California a little while before that. And that's actually a favorite moment of mine because I bought the pay-per-view. Of course, it was also main evented with Hoist Gracie and Kazushi Sakuraba, so that's cool. The fight sucked, but all the same, going in, you didn't know it was going to be bad. But, of course, Brock's on the show. Holy shit, he was supposed to originally fight Hungman Choi, so that would have been a real fucking freak show fight. But he had too many liver enzymes, or something was wrong with his medical testing, Hungman Choi, so he wasn't cleared medically to fight. They got Min Soo Kim, which I think he was an Olympic bronze winner maybe in judo or something like that, but he essentially a can. I mean, he didn't have a great record, and he was a last-minute replacement, so he ended up tapping to punches when Brock was in his mount. But one of my favorite moments with that was Goldberg was one of the 2 or 3 people doing commentary, and he lost all semblance of professionalism when Brock won, and he just stood up, he just marked out. It was awesome.
Indeed. The way you put that to me, it does sound awesome. Of course, my favorite Brock Lesnar MMA moment was his first UFC fight against Frank Mir. Even though he lost, he still looked like a legit threat, and it's your theater to be like, you want to see what he could do in the coming years in the UFC. And of course, one quick little sign up before I get off here. Of course, pretty much like the rest of the people, pick their fighter of the year would definitely be John Bone Jones, because he stepped in a year when UFC lost George St. Pierre to injury, and they didn't have enough big running money cards on their shows, and they had to rely on the younger talent in order.
Yeah, and Lesnar was out most of the year too with his illness.
Yes, he was. And they had to rely on the younger talent to produce these great shows. And John Bone Jones stepped up to the plate. And he's arguably the best MMA fighter in the world. Arguably still the best MMA lightweight in the world as well. But even though
light heavyweight, that would be.
Light heavyweight. Yes, thank you for correcting me there. Even though my personal favorite is still the big mad Russian Fedor Emelianenko, but
and there's rumors about Fedor. I don't know where. I mean, I have an idea where it's coming from, but there's been rumors the past couple of weeks Fedor might be in UFC. I don't know how well that would work out, but it's just funny that that's still cropping up.
Yeah. Eric, I'm just asking, if Fedor rumors were true, and essentially they probably may not be true, but if they were true, which UFC fighter would you see him face if Dana White booked him to face any UFC fighter in the world? Who would you have him face?
Is this who would I do it, or what would Dana White do?
Yeah. If you could ask Dana White to book it, which fighter would you like to see Fedor face one-on-one in the cage?
If we could convince Randy Couture to come out of retirement, Will Brooks, don't you think that would be something people would still want to see?
That's the only fight I want to see Fedor really fight. I mean, that was the fight 4 or 5 years ago. That was the fight we all wanted. And it was possible, not possible, but it was almost in our grasp, and we wish we could have seen it, and it sucks that we couldn't see it. But that that was the fight, and that still could possibly happen if he gets signed right now. Granted, it should not be the main event. It probably should be second or third match, last match, but it's got to be the match.
It really is, because Ryan, that's a really hard question to answer, because I don't see anybody that he could match up against that he could really succeed against. I think in the past couple years, he's really lost that mystique. He's really lost that aura, and fucking fights against, who did he just beat in Russia? Monson and Aiji, or whoever it was they fed him on New Year's Eve with. I don't see him really getting back that mystique. I mean, maybe Verdum in a rematch, but Verdum looks so great in his fight with Roy Nelson, I don't see it really going any differently. And Fedor's last big fight in Strikeforce, he lost to Dan Henderson, who's someone who could compete for the middleweight title coming up next. He went up like 2 weight classes or a weight class at least, to fight Fedor and beat him soundly. So what do you think about Fedor in UFC? Who do you think he should be matched against?
I think Randy Couture is the only actual option. I was actually playing EA Sports MMA the other day on
Which
my
is
PS3.
awesome, by the way.
It is. You actually unlock a trophy, or on Xbox, you actually unlock an achievement just for having that fight. You actually unlock a trophy for having Fedor versus Randy Couture. So even EA is saying that fight needs to happen. So
it's on the cover.
People. It is on the cover. I just want to backtrack 1 second real quick on my favorite Brock Lesnar moment for MMA was when he, I actually said this on a message board, was when in the opening seconds of his Frank Mir fight, Goldberg, not the wrestler, was commenting like, how long will it take Lesnar to go for a takedown? How about 5 seconds? Because as he was bringing it up, Lesnar already took him down. It was just so great to see.
One of the great sound bites from Mike Goldberg, and it's funny because when you mentioned that, I had no idea which debut fight with Goldberg you meant. So really, it made me think, wow, every fight Lesnar has ever had has had a Goldberg commentating it.
And another segue was when you mentioned Verdum and how good he looked against Roy Nelson. Have we brought up before Roy Nelson's little bet with the UFC fans?
What bet was that?
If he gains 100,000 likes on Facebook, he agrees to drop to light heavyweight.
I heard about Pat Barry's bet that he's not going to cut his hair until he wins by submission or something.
Yeah, but I mean, he's already signed to fight Bigfoot Silva, so that's not going to happen anytime soon. But how do you think Roy Nelson would do at 205?
Wow, I mean, that's a really good question because obviously he'd be a pretty big 205. But that's how he's fought for his career at heavyweight, and it seems like maybe his cardio would improve a little bit. I don't think it's too bad right now, but at the same time, he's also a jiu-jitsu practitioner, but you don't see it too much because he stands up a lot, and he does have a great right hand. Maybe it wouldn't be as effective without the size. I don't know. I mean, I don't see it really benefiting him too much. What do you think?
I think he's found out that at heavyweight he's really more or less a gatekeeper, but I'm also concerned about if he goes to 205, how he could deal with like the speed of like
John Jones,
Rashad Evans, Lyoto Machida. But I
would not be able
honestly,
to match those guys.
Oh no. But I think this fight with Bigfoot Silva, I think this is going to be really big because if he loses, that's 4 fights in a row he's lost. I think he'd have no choice but to drop. But I mean,
kind of like Akiyama.
Oh yeah, but he made the bet with UFC fans. He said, "Hey, if I get 100,000 more likes on Facebook, then I will agree to drop to 205." That was the big thing that was going on. I liked it. I remember checking it one day. I liked it. It was at 45. One day later, it was at 95. So the fans want to see it.
Gerald from Mississippi, you were on.
A quick subject change here about Sheamus and Bryan. I was thinking that was a good point somebody brought up earlier about how they haven't touched on how they basically messed him over last year. Mm-hmm. And I understand how WWE wouldn't do it
mainly because they have selective memory. But I figure with this so-called reality era going on with all this breaking, all this cheap shit and breaking of kayfabe, I would figure maybe one of them might bring it up in the sense of, if nothing else, drawing a little bit more interest to it. I mean, because I think if it wasn't overshadowed, of course, by the rest of the main events, it could easily headline its own show. Just wanted to add that onto the mix.
I don't see why they couldn't. I mean, CM Punk and Chris Jericho's match is getting a little more attention, I guess would be the word, with the dad thing, and I could see Daniel Bryan even mentioning it, even if in passing, if nothing else, in one of these promos, like, last year, Sheamus and I, for the U.S. title, it happened, but not on the pay-per-view. This is a match that people should pay to see, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Let's see what Justin from Eagle, Wisconsin has to say.
Just wondering if anyone catch TNA's Victory Road pay-per-view this Sunday.
I think it's a common trend that every once in a while I'll bring up on the forum that for 8 months in a row I'll completely forget that TNA has a pay-per-view on. This one I actually did know was coming, and I was able to catch, but there was some good moments, but I just really, I think it was more or less not so much a letdown, but not really what you would hope for. I mean, we had some matches that, like, James Storm versus Bully Ray, that was way too quick. I just don't like Zema Ion in general, so even Austin Aries can't get me interested in that match. You had Samoa Joe and Magnus beating Matt Morgan because Crimson basically turned heel, which honestly I couldn't care less about. Devon faced off against Robbie E. I think he'd win the television championship, which, well, again, I really can't care about. Gail Kim is still winning, which I suppose is TNA's way of saying, take that, WWE. I don't know. Like, hey, we're going to use the talent that you refuse to use. Like,
well, they should, because in at least Gail Kim or the Knockouts case, they're actually drawing ratings.
They are, but I'm just saying, like, last time we see Gail Kim in WWE, she eliminates herself from Battle Royal. Then, like, a month later in TNA, she's holding 2 belts at once. Very subtle, TNA. As I've said many, many times, I'm probably one of the biggest AJ Styles fans ever. I liked the tag match with Anderson, Daniels, and Kazarian. I didn't love it, but I'm glad that Styles won. As long as he wins, I'm happy, more or less. Angle and Hardy was pretty good, but I've seen both do better, even against each other. But I really think that Bobby Roode beating down Sting, I said before I don't really like main event pay-per-views where the champion's competing but not defending, much like Richards at the 10th anniversary show. Mm-hmm. But I like this because this is what I'm saying. This actually builds to him and Storm instead of just saying, all right, we're facing him later, we're not going to do anything. See, at least they know how to build a match. They can actually elevate it because Bobby Roode is actually looking more and more legit as TNA champion, almost to the point where people are slightly considering forgetting the big fuck-up at Bound for Glory.
Like you're saying, at least we know they're building towards Lockdown, where it's going to be James Storm and Bobby Roode, and they come up with incremental ways of chipping away at the story. Whereas this Rock Cena, for instance, and all this talking on Raw, it just seems more like, I don't want to say phoning it in, but if you have...
They're not building up, they're building across.
Right, as you said. Because there's ways to build up and come up with a different scenario, let's say, or another chapter every week. It doesn't have to be exactly the same promo response sort of stuff every time. I think they could come up with a little more creative stuff, and it doesn't necessarily mean going to the extreme of putting Rock in an ambulance and ramming it with a truck, but there are other ways I think you could come up with, especially with a fucking creative team of a dozen people or whatever. But as you were saying about the former beer money.
I mean, I like that they're both pushing for world titles. I just miss beer money. I'm sorry. I do. Like I said, I just like that they're actually building towards something. And whether or not Lockdown's going to be good, that remains to be seen. But at least I know that they're not just giving this a throwaway title match, basically like Sheamus Bryan. That's just a throwaway title match at this point. And I'm probably going to be puking at the end of this show for saying this, but it looks like TNA is outdoing WWE in this department.
At WrestleMania time? How dare you? But thank you for at least covering TNA. I'm sorry, everyone, I forgot to bring it up before. So thank you, Ryan, for mentioning some stuff about Victory Road. Hope you're satisfied with that.
Yes, then.
Okay, anything else you got to say, Justin?
You posted on the news update that Oklahoma was banning all combat sports, MMA, boxing, and wrestling. Thoughts on that?
Well, it seems like it was something to do with the amount of tax that they charge in the state. There was a little more to it than I necessarily wrote, but it wasn't, I think, confirmed 100%, so I didn't include it. But that's just rumor and hearsay. Jim Ross was blogging that it's going to be cleared up sooner rather than later. I don't know if he meant specifically for WWE only because they had events planned in a few months or whatever, so they were already set up for that. I don't know. But it seems like he's of the belief that it'll be cleared up sooner rather than later. I think it's just some bullshit political move as far as tax revenue goes. Royce, you're back on.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about the previous shows you two had, the one about Brock's career and the one about the year in review.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to talk about Brock. And I don't really have like a favorite match of his. I have a few more notable ones, like you said before, his match with Taker at in the Hell in a Cell, and his match with Rock. But I really liked his match with Angle, not at WrestleMania 19, but I think it was the rematch. Was it at SummerSlam?
Correct. Rodney, I think, mentioned SummerSlam and how he thought it was a better match.
I have to agree with that sentiment because it's not just because of the botched shooting star. I just thought,
told a better story, more concise.
Yeah, more smooth. It like the WrestleMania match for a main event, it just felt like stiff and like
it felt all over the place, kind of.
Yeah, especially compared to like the previous matches they had at that card, it felt really stiff. Compared to who was in the match, it really did deliver. I think earlier you said how would you think Brock would have gotten over without Heyman? I don't think so, because I think a good example of that is kind of like maybe it's different booking as well, but I have to say, look at Jack Swagger. When he won, it was kind of like meh. Like he wasn't that over, not that great of a talker, so it didn't really work. Like when Brock, kind of the same situation, where it's like they're both like former collegiate athletes and they're champion now, but maybe they don't have the best mic skills. So maybe if they paired Swagger with Vicky when he won it, maybe would have went over a little bit better, and the crowd would have bought it a little bit more. Because it seemed like he just didn't have it in him, even when they were having to do stuff like the Swaggy Award and the Bird and all that. It didn't quite work out. And I want to talk about the year in review. I want to talk about I think pay-per-view of the year, and I have to say underrated pay-per-view of the year. The same thing. I had to say the TLC pay-per-view I thought was the pay-per-view of the year. I thought it edged off Money in the Bank a little bit more. It had more matches, and I thought they were of better quality. Plus, I'm surprised that you didn't talk about it, was Kevin Nash wrestled again in WWE. And it was good, so I'm surprised no one mentioned that. It was like, because that match had every ingredient of like a train wreck. Like it was a ladder match with a sledgehammer on top, but somehow him and
those two.
Yeah, and those two, especially with those click guys, they know how to make it work. So those clicksters can I guess make each other look good.
That's what they do best.
And I thought like the main event was good, and I thought it was easily one of the better ladder matches they had in quite a while. Was the one with Punk, Miz, and Del Rio, and really there really wasn't a bad match on that card, I thought. And it seems like it is. I'm surprised that no one really talks about that pay-per-view all that much. So.
Well, that's what you're here for, Roy, so thanks for bringing that up. And mentioning all this Brock stuff, well, what's funny is you mentioned his jump at Judgment Day 2003, and it really made me think how, also coupled with it was a short match, and Brock was actually performing with hurt ribs, and I think that's part of why they made it so short and he was already getting over, so they turned him face by having Heyman turn on him, which I never really cared for myself. But just the fact that it was the first Big Show Brock match, and he was throwing around the fucking Big Show, and we knew he was hurt too, working hurt, and he lifted him up still and F5'd him, one of the biggest holy shit moments, at least of that time. But then you mentioned the stretcher match at Judgment Day, and it made me think, like, wow, because you also mentioned the ring breaking with the superplex on SmackDown, and it made me think, wow, Brock and Big Show had a lot of good matches, because they also had the opener of Royal Rumble 2003, and this was where Brock finally got his definitive revenge against the Big Show and was tossing him around with belly-to-bellies and whatnot, and then went on to win the Rumble later in the night too. But also, the three-way main event of Vengeance 2003 was really good, and that was the first SmackDown pay-per-view, which was a great show. I think one of the best shows they ever did, actually. But the main event was Brock, Angle, and Big Show in a three-way, and this included Brock powerbombing Big Show after running across the ring with him first. If he had just split-legged, it would have been a running Liger bomb, but Angle won that match clean with a Angle slam, and it was an awesome three-way, and it just made me think, like all those times you mentioned, all those awesome Big Show matches that Brock had. Any thoughts on the Big Show matches? Because you said if he came back, maybe one more.
It just seemed like, to me, that was Brock's best feud. I mean, like, people want to say Kurt Angle, I know it's great, but it was the first time we ever saw someone really manhandle the Big Show. It was like, holy shit, it makes you want to watch these matches. And then in between, they had the whole betrayal of Paul Heyman, which at the time was kind of like, we were like, really, you're gonna ditch Brock for Big Show? Like, I get what you're saying, but really? And then the Big Show Brock makes Big Show look stupid. Not stupid, but like builds him, picks him up, and throws him around. You're just like, holy shit! I didn't know anybody could actually do that. Oh man, it just made all those matches interesting. Which, if you make every match and then a feud interesting, that's gonna go down as a great feud. And to me, that was Brock's definitive feud. Really showed that he was the fucking man.
Gerald in Mississippi, anything else?
Yeah, one thing about TNA, yeah, I agree with Ryan that I just plain out, just straight up miss beer money. But interesting thing is Motor City Machine Guns is supposed to be coming back soon, and at least on paper, I'm glad to see somebody in the mainstream U.S. As far as trying to do something with tag team wrestling. So I'm interested in seeing them come back and shake it up a bit.
Cool. And Abe in Augusta, Georgia, I'm going to give you the last word before I go back to Ryan.
Okay, I have to ask you, I'm almost confused now with the interviews and promos. What's the difference? Because almost like now it's an interview as a promo, and then now, like, you know, the term everything is a promo, there's no interview. Can you explain the difference?
Well, an interview is if someone's asking the questions and holding the mic. That's really it. Everything, I mean, interviews are promos, but promos are not interviews, if that makes any sense.
Oh, you mean like if, like when CM Punk or Jericho did that thing, like, last night where they were just talking, like CM Punk's in the ring talking and Jericho's on the Titan or something like that. That's like a promo where interview is like in JR interview Mick Foley. That's the difference.
Absolutely. And it's not like it has to be a sit down in the back or anything. It could be just the GM or whoever, Michael Cole, Jerry Lawler. Let's bring out so-and-so.
Yeah, because it's confusing now because almost everything else is a promo. If you type on YouTube or something like, this is a promo instead of like an interview.
But that's fucking YouTube. People post shit on there. They have no idea, first of all, how to spell, let alone the context of how to write. And I'll give you, for instance, I was looking up when Shawn Michaels was in the NWO and he super kicked Booker T. You may remember that. This was the NWO in WWE back in 2002 when Shawn Michaels was with them, and he super kicked Booker T to essentially kick him out, literally and figuratively, of the NWO. Well, they did the same thing the next week, or so thereabouts, where Shawn Michaels super kicked Big Show, I think maybe after a tag match or something. It might have been like Big Show and X-Pac losing to, like, who knows, Bubba Ray and Spike or who knows what. But anyway, point being, after the match, Shawn Michaels super kicks Big Show, but the person who was posting this file on YouTube, misspellings and all, but the gist was Shawn Michaels super kicks Giant, and they spelt it Gaint, by the way. First of all, he wasn't the Gaint or the Giant, it was the Big Show, so wrong promotion. but Shawn Michaels super kicks Giant, or Gaines, out of NWO. But that's not what happened at all. As opposed to Booker T, where he was being thrown out of the NWO, Big Show was not. This made it seem like it was, but it was really tough love. He was still with the group, but they were like putting him on notice. So there's no fucking context to a lot of the stuff people write, so maybe I could see why you could get confused sometimes. But so far, this has been our longest straight in one-piece show ever, so I'm glad that we've given everyone the chance to speak and have their voice heard. And Ryan, thank you for being the first radio guest panelist, because you're a part of the show, man. You were the first, as your tag on the message board points out, the first person to ever get a question in the submission round years ago already. So you were the first for a couple things here on Wrestling Roundtable, so thanks a lot.
Proud to be on here. I was also one of the first guests on the very first radio show. I mean, really like this. I really like this. I mean, the shows, the radio shows, the forum, which everyone listening, join now, discuss.wrestlingroundtable.com. Really proud to be here. Lovely show. Glad to be a part of it. Thank you, Eric.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the support over the years. Yes, we've had other radio regulars from Chicago and Baltimore, but you're the first guest radio panelist specifically for the night, Ryan. So thank you very much, and thanks for supporting the show all these years, and hopefully everyone listening will do the same. So join us in a couple more weeks. We'll be back talking about the big show, not the Gaint or the Giant, but WrestleMania 28. Yes, we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about WrestleMania 28, and this show is available on Blog Talk Radio immediately after going off the air. So even though we're in overtime, you can listen to us at any time. So join us on Facebook. We got 2 pages over there, a group page and a fan page. We're on Twitter. We're on iTunes, YouTube, Blog Talk Radio, Go Fight Live, and, of course, WrestlingRoundtable.com with the message board and everything. So for the panel of Rodney LeConte, Orlando O'Neill, Will Brooks, Ryan from Massachusetts, and all the callers, thank you very much. I'm the host, Eric Santamaria. Join us on WrestlingRoundtable.com.